Well. Good evening and welcome to the Maroon and Gold Connections, an interactive career networking event hosted by the University of Minnesota Alumni Association. I'm Steve Davis, the co-associate vice president of engagement of the UMAA, and we are definitely excited to offer you this event for the second year in a row here on Hop In. This event is part of our fourth annual Career Month, and this year we've been focused on bringing you relevant career content in the wake of the pandemic to help reignite your purpose and provide focus on your trajectory. We have something for every stage of your career so far, and that continues tonight. Career Month is made possible by many great partners that we have, and we want to thank some of those partners for all the things that they have been able to provide this for so far this month. Our presenting sponsor, Freedom Financial, ACR Homes, Happiness Hunt, Happy with Work, and the Pillars of Prospect Park. Also, we want to thank all of our alumni, students, and members that are here with us tonight, including our friends of the university. But a special shout out to our members. We couldn't provide these type of events included in Career Month without the support of you. Plus, we are truly enthusiastic about the current students investing in your future tonight. These past years have been challenging for all of us, and we hope to empower you in your career in the midst of all of this. During this event, you'll get a chance to participate in moderated sessions focused on bringing you insights on work and navigating your career in the wake of the pandemic. You'll indulge in a mindfulness practice, and you'll get a chance to network with other attendees. This event is broken up in two parts. And the first part will be the sessions, which is beginning right after we're done here on the stage. Then you'll have the mindfulness break. And at the second part, it will be a lot of networking opportunities for you. Throughout the entire event, you'll have access to visit the expo booth. So I encourage you to go there and see some of the information and resources from the UMAA, as well as some promotions that are brought to you by some of our sponsors. Now, I will share a quick overview of each part after our keynote address. And with that being said, I would like to introduce you guys to a kickoff that we're having today, a special guest, Nancy Lyons. Nancy is the founder and CEO of Clockwork Interactive, and she leads this interactive design and technology agency and is building a people-centered future for leadership and work through frank conversations, fierce truth-telling, and inclusive work advocacy. She is a former Business Owner of the Year, Most Admired CEO from the MSP Business Journal, and a member of the 101 Most Influential People in the World of Work, Management, Career from the Ladder magazine. So Nancy is a very respected professional with a passion for making work better. She is also an author of an Amazon's best-selling book, Work Like a Boss, a kick in the pants guide to finding and using your power at work. At heart, she is a theater geek turned national speaker and a proud weirdo. I am really delighted to be welcoming Nancy here on the stage, and I know she's going to bring a lot of energy and really help us get this evening started off. So welcome, Nancy.
Hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me. My head has never been so big in my whole life. I hope you're all enjoying my very big head. Listen, I want to jump right into what I want to talk about being boss. What does it mean to be boss? Being a boss doesn't mean what your job title is. It doesn't mean your job description. Being boss really means that you possess certain qualities that are really essential right now in this moment in time that we're living in. It's being boss with a capital B, and it's all about understanding people. It's about understanding yourself, and it's about understanding others. And it's about bringing that understanding to everything you do at work, every action, every interaction, every conversation. Being a boss all hinges on being aware of your mindsets and considering how what you're doing right now is contributing to what's around you. Do we all want to curl up in the fetal position right now and just suck our thumbs? Yes. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And there's a time and a place for that. It's okay to do it. As a boss, you can do that. It's not about being perfect. It's not about having all the answers. It's not about being the VP, the president, the CEO. And it's also about not abdicating your responsibility for showing up actively and facilitating healthy culture. It's about not abdicating that responsibility to people with those big titles. It's really about all of us showing up with agency and power and interest and engagement in whatever it is we're doing right now, whether it's in the position we have at work, whether it's in the process that we're following, looking for a new job as we pivot, as so many people have, whether it's how we're reconnecting with colleagues or how we network. We have to recognize that we have power in those moments, and we can squander it or we can use it wisely. We have to know how to show up like a boss and how to share our power and know what will get us through that into those know what will get us through those fetal moments, those moments when we're frustrated, to a different, better mental phase. Being a boss feels really good. And again, it's not about your title. It's about showing up boss. It's a way to take back control in situations that may feel out of control. And right now, a lot feels out of control. I'm with you. When you lead from a place of wanting to understand yourself and others, you learn more about how to navigate situations that generally stress you out or stress other people out or may make you angry or confuse you. In other words, you learn to work like a boss. And I think in order to work effectively as a boss, we have to acknowledge our own brokenness. I think what we're all recognizing right now is that we're all a little broken. Organizations are broken. We're trying to figure it out. It starts with self-awareness. I think none of us are taught how to work. Nobody is taught how to work. Bless the you and all of your glorious diplomas. But I can imagine that very few of you were taught how to work, how to show up resiliently. We talk a lot about higher education in our country, but we don't teach people how to show up for work. We don't teach them how to develop a work ethic and how to manage through the really stressful stuff. We teach them how to be busy. We teach them how to get papers in on time and fall in line and behave and follow a job description. But I don't know. We don't teach people how to exist and actually thrive in the workplace. And now we have to teach ourselves, because work is changing right under our feet right now. Everything is changing. So we have an opportunity right now to flip the script. Work is set up for the way things used to be. And that's why every other thing we see in the news that talks about corporate or work or, the health of work or stress or the pandemic, it all talks about how things were and how we're struggling with how things are. How we work was established when work was transactional. And you know what's happening right now that we're all going to have to wrap our arms around? Work and the culture of work is becoming relational. It's becoming, and listen, I know you've all heard, many of you may have your MBAs and work is, business is about relationships. It absolutely is. But now that reality is showing up and permeating every level of every organization. How we interact with each other in the workplace, how we operate with each other outside of the workplace, how we network, how we perform, how we ask for what we want, how we learn to communicate better. All of that is part of how work is changing. When we were just transactional, people were building widgets. People were measured, their value was measured by their output. Now our contributions are vital to the health of our workplaces. How we show up, the energy we bring to interviews, the ability to ask for a job, all of these things are really important, and they're aspects of relational culture, which is so important. We need both our brains and our creative energy and our inventive ideas. And frankly, all of that requires us to be more human. to bring our humanness. I work in technology. People ask me all the time, when will robots take my job? Why should I pay you and invest in innovation if it could be a threat to what I'm doing? And the truth is, robots will never be human. And that sounds ridiculous and obvious, but why would we fear? Why would we fear something that can't touch who we are and the ability we have to show up creatively or spontaneously or inventively to connect with other people and make ideas better? Nothing can take away our ability to show up like that. And that means neither we or work settings, we're not really equipped for the realities of what we need and want right now. I mentioned earlier that I struggle with people who want to abdicate responsibility for their workplaces, how they feel, how they run, what works, what doesn't work, to leadership. That is the old way of thinking. That's transactional. I work here, I get a paycheck. You need to make it better. Nope. We need to make it better. We need to change. We need to improve how things happen. Those attitudes that were so pervasive not long ago. It's not me that determines the work culture. It's not me that makes all the decisions. It's not me that points the ship in the right direction. Therefore, I'm just going to keep my head down and work, or contribute to toxicity by just pointing to the problems. People do that all the time. We got complacent about work. We decided to show up and do the job, and that's it. So many of us got complacent, but that's not going to work anymore. That's part of the problem. See, we all determine work culture. And what is culture? Culture isn't the free stuff. Right now, we're looking at the Great Resignation, where we're realizing more than ever that it's not pay that makes people show up for a job. It's not pay that makes people take a job. It is a big contributor, but that's not all there is. It's not the free stuff. We talk about benefits. We want healthcare. Healthcare should be a given, but oftentimes it's not. It should be. We want to feel safe and healthy and heard and seen and valued. That's what we want. We want acceptance. We want belonging and recognition of our humanity. And we each contribute to creating those things, where culture is an energy that's palpable. And it's not a place. We get so mixed up. We're so distraught over this back and forth conversation about, are we going to a place or are we staying in our home offices? What are we doing? Is it hybrid? It's not that. That's not what makes culture. We do. People do. How we make other people feel. How we show up in support of other people. How we view competition. How we support each other instead of making each other competition. How we talk to each other, how we welcome and hear and listen, actively listen to each other. We all want to feel valued. And work needs to grow to reflect the world as we know it right now. That's on us. So we have to own our own stuff. We have to recognize that we all bring baggage to work. And perhaps one of the most damaging things we do at work is just settle in and become part of that complacent energy. We're not pushing ourselves to be better, and we're not working to create the best workplace possible. Today, I challenged my own staff. Just over lunch today, I said, we are moving away from transactional cultures to relational cultures, which means when you fill out the best place to work survey and we don't get 100%, I'm not going to feel bad anymore. We all need to feel bad, because it's not my job to help you figure out how to create that connective tissue across teams, across divisions, across clients and projects. Humans are connective tissue. How we talk to each other, how we show up for each other, the space we make for other people to show up exactly as they are, with their best ideas and their quirkiness and their weirdness and the stuff that isn't like us, but is valuable all the same. That's part of owning your own stuff. your own garbage. That's so important. Recognizing when you resist other people because they make you a little uncomfortable, because they aren't a fit with what feels okay for you. I tell people all the time, I own my own business because I am entirely unemployable, because I am not a woman that organizations feel 100% comfortable inviting in. I'm a little big and I'm a little loud and I don't wear the right shoes and I don't care much about fashion, but I care about the work. I care about the brand and the story and the people. I care about us keeping our promises. You tell me what's more important. You tell me what matters more. We have to shift our values in order to show up in this relational culture. We have to shift how we judge other people, how we make it difficult for them to show up in the workplace exactly as they are, bringing their best thinking because they feel so safe. It's a natural extension of how they come to work. It's about growing our own sense of agency. How do you step up and add to the positivity, the positive solutions? And I'm not talking about the toxic positivity that makes it hard to scroll through Instagram right now because everybody else's houses look clean and their children look bathed and their lives look great. I'm not talking about that. In fact, I have laundry behind me right now. Nobody's lives are perfect. So we need to stop pretending like they should be. Like you should show up in a way that makes me comfortable. And we have to get control of our fear. Fear shows up in the workplace more than it should, more than we want it to. How many times do you not speak up or you don't take action because you're afraid of what might happen? You're afraid you might sound stupid. Fear drives so much of how we behave in the workplace. And here's an important takeaway from this moment. No one is fearless. No one, not your boss, not the owner of the company. No one is fearless, but we all have the power to fear a little less. To fear less. I think most generations other than Gen Zs have been taught to believe that we should be grateful for a job. And this mentality has meant that we do not want to rock the boat. But here's the thing. We are all feeling the pressure to innovate. Innovation is so important to most organizations. We need to grow. We need to embrace the fact that innovation requires us to rock the boat, to take risks, to try something new, to look stupid. It's going to require us to embrace those people that think differently, where creative thinking is so far away from what you might be comfortable with. But that idea, that one, those five, those people, they might push us to something better. Fear of changing things or doing things a new way is rampant in humans. Rampant. Yes, there's risk involved. But calculated risk can inspire incremental improvements on old ways that don't work anymore. Work has got to change for this nation to catch up. As a developed nation, we have to embrace the flaws, the failures, and the glory of the humans that we work with. We have to make space for all of it. And we have to stop letting our ego suffer when other people win. That stuff really hurts work. I'm not saying that we have to throw everything that used to work out the window, but it's important to ask, is this way of doing this thing serving our team or our organization? And if it's not, let it go. We're bad at letting go. We don't want to. If it's not broken, don't fix it. But if it's not broken and we're not fixing it, are we looking at it to determine if it's the right, best way? Are we really thinking about the next better version of us? If we're just stuck in the way things have always been, we can't be so tied to what was that we don't grow and expand into what can be. So I think letting go of fear is critical, and embracing the mess. I tell people all the time, embracing the mess is so important. It's actually a boss quality that is my favorite, probably because I'm messy. I'm so human. I don't know what to do with myself sometimes. Here's a pro tip. You are too. But when I lean into that and let myself be messy and appreciate that messiness, whether it's emotional, whether it's how I create, whether it's the space I need to come to something, I really feel like others get it. They're relieved. Work, collaboration, how we show up for each other, that's really a giant melting pot. We're thrown together with a bunch of people we have little in common with, and we have to do some of the hardest things like collaborate and communicate and achieve really hard goals. So cutting through the conformity is really important. It's super critical. Conforming isn't going to help us win anymore. I always call myself a weirdo, and I don't mean that in a bad way. And I say I love other weirdos, and I don't mean that as a criticism. Because here's the deal, we're all unique freaks, every one of us. And it's important that we find ways to show who we are and bring those unique qualities to our work and accept unique attributes in other people. We have a desire to other people. And in othering people, we distance ourselves. What if we seek and draw out what makes people truly valuable and beautiful and interesting? What if we seek out what makes them great teachers for us? What if we seek out what their contribution can be? What if we're more interested in contribution than fit? So you see, all of this contributes to how we show up with those boss qualities. The cult of work is dangerous. It's dangerous, forcing us to behave certain ways and judge other people if they're not like everyone else and they don't look the way you're supposed to. Conformity really minimizes people, and it minimizes outcomes as a result. We aren't all the same. We don't need to all act in the same ways. And if we did, we'd get nothing done. We do a lot of talking about diversity and inclusion. There's initiatives inside of organizations, and it's all very important. But we aren't encouraging people to recognize their own responsibility in creating spaces of belonging, in valuing people who aren't like us, whose experiences aren't like us. We're so sensitive about what DEI is making us talk about. And yet talking about that and embracing those alternate experiences, those experiences that are far away from ours, that's what will make our workplaces better. And it can't happen on an island. It has to happen because we all join hands and we move forward together. It's not an initiative. It's not something special someplace else. It's on all of us. It's the work that we all have to commit to do in order to show up the next better version of ourselves in our workplaces. We have to learn to communicate better. Corporate speak, it's another language. And it doesn't make sense. We have to learn to check our egos at the door. We have to recognize that we can push ourselves to be better if we make room for different conversations. We tend to be so consumed with our own experiences and our own stress and our own busyness, and we wear busyness like a badge of honor. And yet it's not serving us. It's not serving us. We need to recognize that it's not about being busy, and it's not about being selfish, and it's not about our egos. It's about reaching out to one another and creating safe spaces for people to do excellent work. Excellent work. We need to be kind, not nice. Minnesota, if you are from Minnesota, if you spent any time here, which I imagine you did. Minnesota has this thing about nice, Minnesota nice. I don't want nice, I want kind and helpful. Kindness is the shortest route to building connections with other people. And it's so simple. It's so simple. If you understand yourself and empathize with others, you can bring kindness to your interactions. When we take the kind road, we create an energy around ourselves. Emotions are contagious. Energy is contagious. Know your energy and pass it along. Only the energy that you want to come back to you, because you'll get it. You really will. You'll find your way to care about people. You can find your way to care about the work, the people you work with, literally anything in a way that allows you to tap in to your kinder side. So here's the deal. I wish I'd have written the book, The Secret. There is no secret. It takes work. It takes opening your eyes to where you're failing yourself, where you're failing your organization. You might do your job, your very perfunctory job, the pieces and parts of your job, the way the description asks you to. But if you're not showing up bigger, making space for more energy, making it safe for other people to be there with you, and celebrating their victories as enthusiastically as you celebrate your own, then you might be missing out. And I don't want us to miss out anymore. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you tonight. I'm available all the time on Twitter at Nylons. You can find me on Instagram at Nylons, and you can subscribe to my newsletter by going to my website at nancylyons.com if you want to hear more of this. I am done for this evening. I appreciate your time and your attention. Have a great night.
Oh, I was on mute, still in this virtual world. Wow, Nancy, that was tremendous. Thank you. Speaking a lot about being your true, authentic self and showing up as a human, I think it is very needed, a very needed message at this time. Just thinking about where we all are in our career stages, and I think about what is the environment that you want to be in, and not just being going by the steps of the procedures of work, but really thinking about showing up in the way that you want to show up and being yourself and being valued for being yourself. So I really appreciate everything that you just mentioned, and I hope the crowd feels the same way. This was very dynamic. Once again, thank you, Nancy. Everybody, please go check out her book. If you haven't gotten her book, I put the website in the chat. But thank you, Nancy, for being here today. And we really appreciate your time. All right, everyone. Now we are going to get started with the event. For those who don't know, we are about to start the sessions. The sessions actually just got kicked off at this point. I would like to tell you a little bit more about these so you can kind of understand what to expect. To your left, you will see the sessions button, and you can join. There are 4 sessions led by professionals that will talk about topics. And these topics are how to succeed in the changing world of work, which is suitable for all career levels, challenges and successes of career change, which is suitable for mid to late career professionals, strategies for building resilience in the face of stress and burnout, which is suitable for all career levels. And lastly, empowering your career path, which is suitable for our students and early career professionals. You can join any one of these and participate and listen at any time. There will be moderators there going through some slides and some information for you. If you wanted to ask a question, you can raise your hand, possibly join in with your audio and video and ask a question, or you can feel free to ask that question in the chat. Then at 6:20, the sessions will end, and we'll provide a 10-minute mindfulness break here back on the stage. That will be led by Marian Johnson from the Earl Bakken Center of Spirituality and Healing. And after that break, we'll start the networking sessions, and there'll be numerous rooms available for you to network and mingle with each other. Plus, the one-on-one networking feature will be available. We encourage you to have your audio and videos on at that time to mingle with as many people. There will be prompts available in those networking rooms so that you can get those conversations started. And I really am looking forward to you guys having a great time at this event. Lastly, the expo rooms will be available throughout the entire event, so feel free to jump in there. As I mentioned, there's resources, there's promotions, a lot of cool stuff in there, and I hope that you find this event rewarding and have a good time. And I'll see you back for that break and check back with you at the close of this event. So with that being said, you guys have a good event, and thank you for being here.
All right. We'll get started now. So welcome to the Ask Me Anything, How to Succeed in a Changing World of Work session. Today's session is sponsored by ACR Homes and Happiness Hunt. I am Samantha Anderson, and I will be the moderator today in today's session. I am a senior career counselor in the College of Science and Engineering. I will have our guest hosts, Lan and Brianna, introduce themselves quickly.
I can go first. My name is Brianna Pulkey. I'm the Senior Recruiting Supervisor with ACR Homes. As you can see, I don't have my credentials up there because I did not graduate from the U of M. I did go elsewhere, but I have a Bachelor's of Science, and I've worked for ACR Homes for about 11 years, just slightly over that in a variety of roles. And just I'm very thankful to be on at this session today, and I'm so excited to share with you guys.
Hi everyone. I'm Lyanne. As you can see here, I'm the founder and career coach with Happiness Hunt. So I'm one of the sponsors for the event as well, and happy to be here and glad to have you join us tonight. So thank you for taking your time and spending it with us tonight. A little bit about my background. As you can see, I'm an alum of the U of M. I graduated in 2003 from Carlson with the BSB in Finance and Management Information Systems. Spent a lot of my early years in consulting, so did a lot of client work, external client work at Deloitte Consulting, and spent a few years in California getting my MBA at UCLA, and then decided to come back here, worked at Target in their strategy group for a little bit, and realized corporate world wasn't for me, which is when I decided to pivot. So I'm sure a lot of people here are thinking about that as well, career changes. And so I made a complete pivot and actually started career coaching, which is where I found out to be my passion, and helping others find their career, their career journey, helping them on the career journey into finding the happiness. And so that's kind of where I've landed over the past few years, running Happiness Hunt.
Thank you. Today we'll be going through a few questions I have prepared for our host, but please throughout this conversation, add your questions to the Q&A. At the end, we'll be going through those questions and answering those as best as we can. So where I'll start today is just asking Lana and Brianna what changes that you've seen in the past year that relates to work culture and the types of things that employers are looking for in employees.
Yeah, I can go first here. So my perspective is a little different just because I'm on the career coaching side of things, working with students and clients, but I also do some consulting work on this side. So I'll give you my perspective that I've seen. I think, we're entering our third year of this pandemic. So I think overall companies are still trying to figure out what their new normal is. But I think we're getting close to a kind of a steady state of what that might be like. I think the first year it was really panic mode. I think that was where most companies were kind of fires, right? We're just basically figuring out how do we get through this pandemic? How do we keep, the business running during the pandemic? And how do we actually work with a remote workforce? So it's really more, the culture was really more all in, all hands on deck. Let's kind of get through this together and kind of figure out how do we get through this pandemic and hopefully get onto the other side. I think this past year, we're kind of shifting, right? I think we've been back and forth in terms of where do we go now? Once we thought, we had COVID under control, we were thinking about going back to work, into the office, whether that's going back full time or hybrid. And I think we're still trying to figure that out. So we're adjusting, how do we balance, working with a remote workforce, but also how do we support them if they're working, remotely, and also how do we then bring them back into the office? And I think as the pandemic rages on and kind of fluctuates, we're still trying to figure that out. So that kind of leads us to where we are now. And I think that's perhaps kind of the new normal. It's just that companies have decided or are kind of getting to that place where maybe we'll always have to live with COVID and kind of things that surround that. So how do we work together as a company and with our employees to make sure that we're able to continue to support them, whether that's, going full-time remotely. I've seen some companies have decided to do that, where they have sold off their offices and just really saying, we all can just stay home permanently. There's others that are looking at, how do we bring them back into the bring the workforce back into the office. But I think where we're going to land is pretty much a hybrid type model. I think over the last 2 years, we've learned that, culturally, I think there's people who are more comfortable working remotely. There's others that like to be in the office. And so I think there's going to be a mix of that as companies start to decide what that new normal is. And I think, we'll learn more, and I think they'll continue to figure out more. But I think the culture really has been this: how do we get through this together? How do we get to the other side? And I think once we get that stable, then I think we'll go back to the normal. Like, how do we actually continue to, work with our people, support them in other ways, not just working from home, but, development and all that. Is kind of where I've been seeing over the past couple of years in terms of what companies may need in this time. I think it's a little bit of, how do we have the technology, the support to actually have you work from home, work remotely. And I think from a employee-employer relationship, I think it's about having that patient flexibility to kind of work through this and kind of learn from each other, and just having that patience to kind of get through it together. And I think now going forward is now that we kind of have that remote working in place, it's really more about how do we, as a company, support our employees, especially through the pandemic when it comes to mental health and all the other things, all the other benefits that were kind of thrown to the, to the back burner while we were kind of fighting the fires of the pandemic. So that's just kind of my perspective and kind of what I've seen, but I'm sure Brianna has other things that she's seen in her role.
Thanks so much for that response, Lan. Yeah, it's every company's a little bit different. And so I was thinking about that when Samantha asked us these questions. Everybody's going to have their culture shift in a different way through the pandemic. And obviously, those of us that work in any type of administrative or office profession, I think we've seen the biggest switch of doing things digitally. And above all else, no matter what anyone's pivot looked like, we've all had to do it. And so I'm seeing a need for employers needing their employees to be flexible and positive. I'm sure you guys have, just like I have, encountered some switches that feel overwhelming, or you're not sure because it's a pandemic. You're like, are we going to continue on this direction? Is it worth it for me to learn this new piece of technology? Is it going to be something that I use 2 years down the road? Like, is this worth my time? And I think all of us are having to pivot, and our employers are needing us just to be flexible and have positive attitudes. And I really think that allows us to embrace the change. I mean, who does well with change in general? And all of us have had our lives just flipped upside down these last couple of years. And so we're all pivoting. One of the things about ACR Homes is that we're actually a healthcare organization. So we're an essential employer. And so that meant that some of our employees, I work in our office, so I did see a lot of switches, but some of our employees, it was just business as usual for them. But as you guys all know now, they're calling it the Great Resignation. That's been happening. And so we have had employees who worked really hard during the beginning of the pandemic. And I think this is kind of a cultural shift. That's why I bring it up. People who work in these helping professions, essential professions, they were in it, they're ready to fight, they're ready to battle through this. And now they're coming to the point where they're exhausted because things haven't changed for them. They see all of us going digital. They see all these people going remote, but they still have to be on the front lines. And then record number of people across all industries are quitting their jobs. So it's been actually a really big challenge. And so as an employer, when you get to the part of the question where it's saying, what are employers looking for and needing, especially as an essential employer or an employer in a helping profession where you don't get the option to go virtual, I think that loyalty component is huge. With the Great Resignation, it's kind of the job seekers market, which is wonderful for all of us if we're looking for jobs. But also at the end of the day, when you have such a wide market and so many opportunities available to you, I think it can lend itself to not being satisfied wherever you go, thinking maybe the grass could always be greener elsewhere. And employers, I think, are truly needing people to connect into the mission and the vision of their companies and show that loyalty, and from there have their employees show their loyalty. And so right now I feel like just culture at whole is kind of shifting, and people are moving a lot and making a lot of changes. And I think employers are really looking for people that want to be team players and just really dig into the company that they're in and make a valuable impact.
Thank you. How would you suggest that someone navigate the virtual job search or the virtual work environment in general? And how would you recommend people go about building professional relationships in a remote environment and trying to network virtually?
I can start. Well, I know one of the areas where ACR Homes has changed is we've moved completely to a virtual interview process. That wasn't necessarily the case in the past. But I think that it's been a good thing, and we just all need to pivot and be able to navigate this new virtual process. So I'll speak more about like navigating the job search process in terms of virtual. It can feel maybe like you're just another number that way. And so I feel like that's the downside of it. Like, I think it exponentially opens up more opportunities for people when things move more digital and more virtual rather than opportunities coming from career fairs and job fairs and things more like that. But at the same time, I think it gives more accessibility for people for interviews. They don't have to think about traffic and timing and driving somewhere, or maybe you're able now to interview virtually for a position in a different state if you're looking to move somewhere, and it gives you a little more accessibility to all the opportunities that you want. So if I'm going to give some recommendations for maybe a virtual job search process, especially if you're coming from out of state, and this would have been true as a student, is still true even if you're farther along in your career, is you really need to know the companies that you're applying for, and take that time and take that effort to look on their website and utilize social media. Social media is such a huge thing now. I always tell applicants for our organization, if they're thinking about applying with us, yes, you can look on our website for all of the verbiage that we use and the details, the hard facts about our company, but you're going to get such a broader picture of the culture and the workplace culture if you are looking into someone's social media. I think if the job searching process is moving in a more digital format, you really do need to have a standout resume. It can't be something that's an afterthought or that's done quickly. It needs to be something where if you're representing yourself digitally before you get that interview, it has to be such a great representation of you that focuses on the details and the scope of your work. The other thing, we almost chuckle about it in our company. Our poor HR director, Charlie, has had some of the strangest interviews he's ever had in his entire life now that we've moved our interview process to virtual. And so I cannot say enough. Treat any virtual interview just as you would an interview in person, with the same level of professionality, if not more. Come to it, even though you're like, I'm in my house, I'm in my safe, comfortable space. If you would have worn a suit or something dressy to that interview, still wear that in your home and take time to prepare the background of your screen and make sure you're in a quiet environment where you know that you're not going to have any distractions. I think that's really, really important, because otherwise, like I said, we kind of joke about it. The poor HR professional that's doing the interview, sometimes they get some very interesting surprises if people aren't thinking about those factors. And I really think that moving from more in-person to digital, it may seem like the process is a little less, what's the word I'm looking for? You're a little disconnected that way. And so really utilize your personal network for job leads, utilize the people within your circle. And if you're looking for a new position, to try to get ins in companies that way. I think that was true before the pandemic, but even more so now, to expand your network. I know that there's been some opportunities for conferences and things like that moving digital as well. And so I would say attending virtual conferences, even though, yes, you are in your home, or I think, attending conferences, attending things like this is a great way to expand your network. And it might not feel as fruitful maybe as when you used to do things in person, but if this is the only option for now and you're wanting to continue to expand your network for personal or professional growth or for potential job searching, I think it's vital to still take the time to do this and not set it on the back burner so that you can just continue with that personal and professional development.
Great. Thank you, Brianna. That's an awesome response. And I think you covered a lot of the basics that I was going to cover. And I'm going to apologize first off, because just talk about being professional on a call and during your interview. You might hear my dog whining in the background because he wants to get into this room. So do as we say, not as we do in this case.
I feel that too. I have children crying upstairs.
It's just another day in the virtual world, working in the virtual world. But kind of along the same lines of what Brianna was talking about, I think when it comes to job search, I usually say take a step back, and I would say approach it no differently than you would if you were pre-pandemic, in the sense that, we're just using a different medium, right? We're just doing things more virtually, but overall, the way you think about it, the way you approach it should still be the same in terms of, going through the same process, right? You just might need to do some minor adjustments. So I would say, just like always, you want to still do your due diligence, right? Do the company research, do all that research up front and figuring out, is there a fit, is the right role for you and all that. So I think that doesn't change at all. You want to make sure that, you continue, just like Brianna said, work on your resume. It might be, you might need to do a little bit more to stand yourself apart from your competition, but obviously you still need to work on your resume, still need to work on your cover letter. So all those basics are still in place. Maybe the medium again might change, right? So obviously today everything is online, right? So we still will be doing that, applying online applications and all that. So you just have to continue with that, just making sure that you continue to work on your resume as you would, and just making sure that it would pass any tests when you put it through their computer system. Obviously, part of that social media piece, continue to build your online presence. You want to make sure that your story is consistent, right? Whether you use, any of the different online career websites, right? That it's the same consistent, story of who you are that you're putting out front, right? Same with LinkedIn and everything. So making sure you clean that up, you have the most updated version, with all your experience and everything already and in place, so that you're ready to kind of have that, right? Because recruiters, that's the first place they look now too, right? Hiring managers. We just do a quick Google, we do a quick look in LinkedIn or whatnot, and they can easily find you. So you want to make sure that, whatever you have out there is consistent with who you want to be, especially when it comes to a professional environment. Again, obviously a lot of in-person events aren't happening as frequently. So just making sure that you find, virtual job fairs and conferences that you can, can participate, or being such as an event tonight, making sure that you attend those events as you continue to do your research and kind of get out there and do networking and all that. So I would say, again, making sure that you continue to build your network, whether that's virtually or in person. I mean, you could still do it in person if you're comfortable doing that, but that's just as critical in the job search piece. Really relying on your current network, leveraging your network, and also continue to build it in that process. And then, Brianna also mentioned that being prepared to do virtual interviews. A lot of these companies are now doing everything virtually, even in the initial, preview of, scan of that, right? So you want to make sure you have everything prepared, being able to do things virtually, whether that's having the right connections, having everything all set up and prepared for that. So I think job search continues to be the same, just making sure that you adjust to the virtual world. But I would say that extends to the work environment as well. When it comes to your current, work, if you're working remotely. Similarly, some things don't change, whether you're working in the remote world or in office. Again, you just need to make some minor adjustments, whether, you're virtually, I'm sorry if you hear my talk, he's going a little crazy. But, with working virtually, just want to make sure that you are top of mind for your team and for your boss, for your manager, because you don't want to fall into the trap of out of sight, out of mind, right? So in this case, you just have to be a bit more proactive when it comes to the workplace. And so ways you can do that is obviously the basics. You still need to do good work, but make sure when you do your work, you are consistently conveying and demonstrating the work that you completed, sharing your progress with your team, with your coworkers, with your boss and your manager, just so that they remember, like, okay, this is the project that you're working on, this is the progress you've made to date, these are the accomplishments you've done, just so that it's top of mind. They kind of remember that. So I'd say when you're in a virtual environment, you just want to over communicate, which means making sure you're checking in frequently, asking for feedback more often than not, just because you don't want to wait till year end. Because I think part of what we said earlier when it comes to this new culture, we're still trying to figure out how do we evaluate remote workers, right? It's just a little bit different because they don't have the luxury of seeing you in your day-to-day environment, right? So they don't know how to evaluate you until year end. So you want to make sure that you're keeping them up to date throughout the year, throughout the quarter, throughout the month, or even week with frequent check-ins to kind of keep them aware of what's going on with the things that you're working on. And then, I think one of the things that people have stated with working remotely is feeling isolated or feeling disconnected. So making sure how you can maintain that connection with your coworkers, with your manager. And then I'd say, find ways to do that, whether that's in a professional environment. So maybe trying to do lunch and learns that are virtually so that you can still grow professionally, but also stay connected with your team. Or looking how can you do it socially, right? So having virtual happy hours after work where, you can have a drink in hand and just, shoot the breeze and, stay connected that way. So that's just looking at your immediate colleagues. But one of the things we also notice too is that when you work from home, you don't run into people from different departments, right? That you may not work on a team with, but you will at least run them in the hallways and get a catch up with them. And so one thing, you could do is, continue to try to network with those folks, right? Having informational interviews, setting that up as well as you kind of go through that. So continue to build your network that way, extending your network beyond your immediate team, but those in other departments. And then obviously extending beyond the company as you continue to build those professional relationships, looking at networking events such as this, trying to connect, you would still do this pre-pandemic too, but, looking in LinkedIn, seeing, who's in your inner circle and who's at second degree, third degree that they can help you connect with to kind of continue to grow, those relationships. Because, that's still important, even more so in this, virtual world. So that's just a few things that I would recommend that you should do, continue to kind of grow and kind of navigate this virtual world.
Thank you. And if you need to take a second to do something with your dog, just let us know. So my next question, my last question, then we'll get to the Q&A. So I see a few good questions coming in so far. So if you do have questions on how to succeed in the changing world of work, just put that in the Q&A and we'll get to that next. My last question for Brianna and Lan is just on advanced training and education and the skills that we're seeing being posted by employers. And wondering if advanced training is always needed or if there's other ways to gain some of those skills and what are some of the resources out there that you would suggest for skill building?
Yeah, I'll go first since Lan had to step away for a moment. I really thought about this. I mentioned earlier the Great Resignation and how so many people are leaving the workforce, and that leaves a lot of different job openings at different levels across so many different companies. And I know there were a record number of people that retired this year as well. And I personally was having a conversation with one of my career center contacts in CLA this last year, and even at more of a higher level of hiring and positions, they were talking about how they were trying to remove some of the barriers that they have in their positions so that they get the right pool of candidates applying. And so when I think about special skills, yes, we all need them. You read job descriptions. Obviously, you need to fully match the requirements within a job description to be considered for the position. But I think that right now is a time where if you're trying to gain more skills, if you're trying to go back for more education, I think it should be right now more of like a personal or professional development season for you, rather than you're trying to put your nose to the grindstone for the sake of trying to advance and get this specific job. Because I'm seeing employers kind of ease up on some of their requirements right now with the Great Resignation. They're wanting there are more positions open, and so employers I'm seeing across the board are being a little bit less strict. Also, just culturally, and this is a wonderful step forward with everything that's been happening across our nation. We're seeing companies and universities, they're wanting to take out specific requirements in jobs that were possibly discriminating against different people and give more access to more groups of people to their positions. And so I just see that as a wonderful opportunity for the people that previously maybe didn't qualify to be able to step in, and they don't have to have maybe quite as specific requirements for position to apply for it now. So I think that's pretty neat, but there's always an element of professional development, and we all need to think about personally where our careers are going and what we want to do and who we want to be and the kind of jobs that we want to have. And so I think that, if your work is not in like a constant state of chaos because of the pandemic and you are able to take a normal pace, now would be a good time just to look at personal and professional development for your own sake and for your own goals. It's always good to reevaluate those things, even if employers aren't necessarily looking for it, so that you remain super, super competitive. Myself, actually, I've been in my current position for, it's been about 7.5, almost 8 years. And I was looking for growth, not in a different organization. I think if you work for a wonderful company, it's about growing where you're at, not necessarily always looking for a new job. And I'll be starting an online digital marketing program with the University of Minnesota this coming spring, with a title change coming with my company, and I just saw an area of need. And so I think that instead of always moving on to a different position and looking for something completely different, see how you can grow yourself in your current role or your current organization, and if there is that room for growth. So I just had a conversation with them and just said, I've been seeing this area of need for the last couple of years, and it's not a criticism. It's how can I, as an employee that really enjoys my job, come alongside this company and partner with your mission and your vision better and offer you these abilities that I have. And I asked for more advanced training for it so that I could be the person that filled the role where I saw the need. And they said yes, which was wonderful. And so I'll be starting that this spring at the U, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. It's hard sometimes when you're a working professional. If you've heard my kids upstairs, when you've got kids and you've got family and you already have a job, but time is of the essence. We only get to live one life. And so I think it's really more looking at what you value and what you want your career to look like and what you want to spend your time on. And that's how I at least made my decision to go back for some more schooling while I'm a mom and a working professional as well. It felt worth it to me in this phase of life. It felt exciting. It was something that I wanted to do. And I think just really evaluating yourself and if those things feel worth it is important while you're making those decisions. So just to kind of summarize my answer, it's not quite as competitive in the job market right now. I think there's a lot of positions open, both entry level, mid, and further on in your career. So now I wouldn't do those things as trainings or certificate programs or your master's program or whatever it might be to be super competitive, but do it for your own personal and professional development.
Great. Thank you, Brianna. Thank you for sharing your personal story there. And my apologies about my dogs. So I think, I feel like Brianna hit on most of the points that I was going to cover too. And I think, fortunately, it's a job seekers market. So if you're looking to change jobs, transition jobs, you're in a good position, right? There's a bit more flexibility there. But if I put on my career coaching hat, I'm always going to say professional development is always important, no matter where you are in your career, whether you're early, mid, or even later in your career. So I think it's always important for you to kind of think through that. But yes, I would agree that right now companies are a little bit more lax when it comes to those requirements. And I think as long as you have the basic requirements met and you're able to kind of do the job and also tell that story of if there are gaps in your skill set, what can you do to close those gaps? And if you can kind of talk to them through that process, I think, you definitely are in that advantageous seat. But I think, when you take a step back and kind of think through, overall professional development, I would agree, right now is probably more for personal development. Like if it's for more personal growth that you're looking to, I would say, it's always good to kind of continue to grow, personally in a professional way, right? So I think it's about how do you actively seek opportunities to learn and grow is always important, and good for you if you are able to have the time and luxury to do that. So I'd say, look into taking courses, whether that's doing online courses through a university, right, or through a college or a local community college, or even through different courses online that are available, such as LinkedIn Learning, or even doing a master class, right? There's so many options available to you to grow personally. So there's a passion that you're trying to pursue, a skill set that you need. Feel free to look into that and kind of close that gap. Listening to podcasts. There's so many different podcasts out there that can teach you different skill sets. So I think reading and all that will be helpful, and seeing how you can actually take that and apply it to your everyday job. How can you share that with others, if that's in your network or in your current job. But also think about things professionally in the workplace. I would say, if you're not looking for a new job, but you want to continue to grow in your current position, I'd still say it's still important for you to continue to develop those skill sets today, just because with kind of the pandemic and everything, companies, a lot of companies have admitted that, professional development has been thrown to the back burner, right? It's just has not been critical for them to focus on developing their employees. They just don't have the time, the energy right now. And so you don't want to lose sight of that. You don't want to lose these 2 years because your company wasn't on top of that. So you should still stay on top of that yourself, whether that means, sitting down with your manager, having discussions about, this is my goal. This is where I want to be once we get all this fog. This is where I want to be in 5 years. How can I get there? Working with your manager to kind of talk through that so that you're not losing, these 2 years or 3 years, right? So that you still have a path forward once we get out of this. So understanding, what kind of training do you need, if there's necessary training that you need or education that you need? Is it something that the company has that they can help provide you, whether that's their training development department that they have in place where you can do the training in-house? Or is it something that they're willing to sponsor you or pay for financially? If you could take a course at the local community college or take a course at the University of Minnesota, seeing, if that's something that they can do, so that you can close the gap or gain those additional skills to get you to, the next role that you want or an advancement. So I think it's still important for you to still actively have these conversations with your manager, just so that, we don't lose sight of kind of where you are, in a few months when things are kind of go back to the steady state. So I would say continue to look into that. And kind of like what Brianna said, sometimes training and development doesn't come in direct, like taking a course or all that, but it can also come in terms of how do you stretch yourself, right? So whether asking your manager, are there special projects? I mean, right now companies are running on low resources, right? So there's probably a handful of things that they could, use a hand on, with your help on. So asking, are there special projects I can, get involved with, help out with, or are there stretch assignments for me so that I can continue to build my skill set and expand my experience? And so that's one way to kind of continue to grow and develop in your role. So, it doesn't hurt to ask your manager. And I would always encourage to do that, now, more so now, but also, in the future as things kind of stabilize.
I wanted to add on really quick too, before we move on. I was thinking about this further about what if you're going to go on for further professional development, or if there's some sort of education you're going to get. I think that if there's anything we've learned through the pandemic is that technology came in full force and in different ways that we've ever had before. And I think it's here to stay too. And so I really think that that's valuable to think about. And I think if you're going to do some sort of professional development, think about how technology has personally impacted you or your industry. And think about if there's trainings or developments or anything that you can do that helps you become more advanced or specialized in the technology that you use. I was thinking about my husband too. He's an educator, and he's currently going back for a master's program, and he's been thinking for years about which portion of education he'd like to focus on. And he ended up landing on a master's in education and technology, because once technology comes, we know that it doesn't go away. It only progresses and grows. And so I think that whatever industry you're in, however technology has grown and moved and changed, it's going to be there, and it's probably just going to expand. So if you can do some sort of training or programming, or even online YouTube videos, you can pay for online sessions, sometimes just personally to grow and challenge yourself. I think that's going to be really valuable and really important moving forward to stay relevant in whatever your profession is.
Thank you. Now we're going to jump to the questions in the Q&A. So if you do have questions for our hosts, please put them in the Q&A section. The first question that I'm going to put out there is that, so if either of you have any experience with onboarding programs in a remote environment, this person said that they have a couple new people on the team and would love to hear more about how to make them feel a part of the culture and team while working remotely. Or what would you suggest to someone that's starting a new job in a remote environment? How should they get involved? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can speak to that. ACR, one of the things I think that they're really great at is their onboarding process. We took a big change, made a lot of progress forward, and made some big changes about 5 years ago. And obviously at the beginning of the pandemic, when we were all in panic mode, things just fell apart for a little while. Not that nobody got onboarded, but like the way that we were doing our onboarding process previously was so in person, and so we had to really modify. One of the things that our company has is a mentorship program. We know that particularly for our employees, the hardest time, this is probably for any profession, but really for a couple of our positions that we hire for, the hardest time is the first 4 to 6 months, I would say. They're learning new skills and putting those into practice, and we have a lot of people fall off of their hiring journey at that point. And so we implemented a mentorship program. So we've moved that digitally. Previously, it used to be we would pair new hires up with a current employee, and we would provide that employee funds to go grab a cup of coffee or whatever it might be. Now everything's digital, so they do digital meetings with someone, and we decided that the mentorship program would be beneficial because we wanted to pair people up who were maybe in similar phases of life or just maybe have some similar backgrounds, so that it can be this person that feels more like an equal, because as you're walking into a new job or trying something new, sometimes it feels intimidating to speak to your manager about the areas where you're struggling or you have further questions. And so we've seen a lot of success with now it's moved virtually. Obviously someday we would like to move it back to an in-person program, but the mentorship program has been essential in retaining employees. So I think that's a successfully adapted onboarding program where, like I said, it's more of a relational program, but we've just moved it through video calls and FaceTime instead, and maybe everybody's got their cup of coffee or tea or whatever it might be from home, and they're sitting and they're still having just face-to-face conversations, but digitally instead. Let's see here. And then we're hiring how to help someone feel part of the culture. Yeah.
If you want to quickly, otherwise we only have 3 minutes left.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I want to
Sorry.
get other questions too. So one of the questions is about if you're making maybe you're trying to change careers or get back in the workforce, and you might be a little farther along in your career, and a lot of the internships they're saying is for current students or recent alums, which as a senior career counselor, I know that I see that all the time. Most internships are only for current students. So what kind of opportunities should someone look for if they're trying to change careers, if internships aren't available to them? Or entry-level positions if they feel like they're a good fit, but then it's asking for a recent graduate.
I was thinking about that earlier when I saw the question. I think that maybe employers are making assumptions when they're posting things, so I would just apply anyways, honestly. And see, because maybe they're assuming that someone further along in their career won't necessarily want that internship, or maybe they're assuming the pay fits more with a recent grad. So I would say just go for it anyways, even if it's formatted to that. That would be one of my suggestions. The other would be utilize your personal network a lot more. Find out where people are working and where there are openings, and use that connection to help you into an organization rather than just kind of coming in cold.
And to build on that too, I think Obviously, you want to keep your options open and definitely apply, but also be ready, be prepared to answer that question of like, why are you pivoting now? Why are you making that change now? And so a lot of times you can definitely demonstrate that in a cover letter if they're asking for a cover letter, right? Because obviously, if they only see your resume, they're going to be like, okay, this person's either overqualified, or this is a complete 180. Why are they doing that? So you have to be prepared to answer those questions, and they can't, you can't answer that on a resume. So having a cover letter that goes along with that will help. Obviously, building what Brianna said, if there's a network, if you know someone that works at that company or someone that knows someone else, maybe make that introduction will help you kind of get your foot in the door versus trying to go through, the typical path where everyone's just throwing in a resume or an application. So I would say, try to start there as well, but be prepared to answer that question of why. Like, why are you doing that? Why are you making that change? Because that will be one of the curious questions that they'll have.
Okay. And last question, I just want to touch on it because a couple of people are interested. How to demonstrate leadership skills on your resume if you're trying to advance to senior management or trying to get a leadership role at a different company?
I would say show proven results on your resume and be specific. That would be my number one suggestion.
And I would say you need to define what leadership is, right? I think each role has a different definition of what leadership is. So making sure, is it leadership in developing people, managing people, directing people, or is it leadership in solving problems? And so making sure that you have those proven results in your resume, but figure out what they mean by leadership for that particular company and particular role.
Thank you. And I think if you still have questions, we might be around later in the networking part of this session. So right now, I know back in the main room, they have a mindfulness session going on. So I think we're concluding this session. And then, if you have questions or anything later on, I'm not sure if there's a way to connect later.
Or else you're more than welcome to connect with me, and I'm sure Brianna on LinkedIn or whatnot, and I'm more than happy to answer questions through that way as well.
And you can also direct chat folks using the chat feature. So if you wanted to direct chat to any of our presenters, you're welcome to do that too.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brittany. I'm Kate Schaefers, and I'm here to introduce you to our speaker, George Dow. Since 1989, George has helped business and nonprofit leaders improve their career transition effectiveness and ensure fit with their future direction. He helps his clients through assessments, identification of options, and coaching to achieve the desired results, both professionally and personally. George has also taught graduate and undergraduate career management courses at the University of Minnesota Carlson School of Management, and he was a Faculty of the Year nominee in 2005. A dedicated industry leader, George has been president of the Minnesota Association of Career Management Professionals and a board member of the International Association of Career Management Professionals. He received the Jules Curlin Lifetime Achievement Award from the Minnesota Career Development Association in 2009. And personally, George is one of the best career coaches I have ever met, and I am just thrilled that he's here today. George, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kate, so much. That was a very kind introduction, and I'm ready to go. What I'm about to share with you is a model that I created about 15 years ago. I spent about 21 years in a career transition firm called Right Management, and about halfway through my time there, I realized we need something that can name the choices people have when they're at the crossroads and to speak to degree of difficulty and economic consequences. So being a fairly creative person, I relished the opportunity to create something to help shed some light on what are people's choices and what are their strategies when they're at a crossroads. And I like to use this metaphor, a valley metaphor, to help people understand what I'm talking about as far as the 9 choices and the degree of difficulty. Because you can imagine when you go to the bright side of this, you're going to go up the mountain and it's going to get increasingly more difficult. If you go to the left side, the same challenge. If you're on the flat land, it will be a little bit less strenuous. And I'll be your guide. That's me. That's a Sherpa. That's actually not me literally, but metaphorically, that's me. And I'm going to show you, if you put a grid on top of the career alternatives that I'm about to share with you, you'll see that on the bottom is money, where you see money and you go to the right and it's less or equal or more money. If you go to the right side, the valley that goes up from the valley on the right side, if you go to the left, it's less money as you consider those options. And then the degree of difficulty gets higher as you go higher in the model. You'll either leave or explore on the left or the right side, or stay and grow in the middle. So let me take it even further to show you what it looks like in graphical form. My son helped me with this. I told him this is what I wanted to communicate, that there are these 9 choices. And as you see again, right or left is money, up higher is more difficult. So I'm going to take you through this point by point. But I also want to tell you that on my website, it's georgedow.com, www.georgedow.com. If you go to the 2018 series, the first 3 months are going to be the how to transition or transform your career. The next 9 will be each of these 9 career alternatives I'm about to describe to you, with a case study for each. So I'm just going to briefly talk about the case study. And if you want to dig into any more details, again, go to the last 9 blogs in 2018. My website, just go to the upper right-hand side, it's blog archives, and you'll be able to go into more detail. So let me just talk you through these, and then I'm going to talk to you about the how-to. This will speak to the successes of clients I've worked with over the years in each of these categories. New environment, I'll describe it first. Change industries, work culture, size or type of firm, but continue in a similar function. So one of my clients I have the blog series is a woman that went from an IT position in a large for-profit to a large nonprofit. And what she found was really interesting is that one of the assumptions when you move from the for-profit to the nonprofit sector, you're going to take on jobs that are less lucrative financially. The interesting thing was that she didn't lose income. The nonprofit paid her very similar to where she was before. What she really liked was the mission felt more personally engaging to her, more emotionally connected to the engagement of a nonprofit than a for-profit. So that was an example of a similar function, but a new environment, moving from for-profit to nonprofit. The next option is new terms, and I'll describe it to you now. New terms change compensation terms, including contract work, part-time, and/or flexible schedule. The example in the blogs that I sent is a man that followed his wife, who became the president of a nonprofit institution, and he ended up having no network except for hers. So he was able to have her network to find a couple of different things: a half-time job at that city's United Way in marketing, and then 2 adjunct professor titles, 2 different classes in a university, actually the same university that she was working in. So new terms for him was to also find a new network, a new reality for a new city and everything, but he was able to successfully tap the people that she was working with to get into contract work and half-time work. The next example for new venture, this is one of my favorites because I learned it from my 8th grade English teacher. I met him about 8 years ago. He had turned 60, and his son said, "We should start a business." And he had been a corporate person for his whole career. And what happened is that when his son said, we should start a business or buy a business, actually his daughter found a business in data storage. And this man acquired the business, and he ended up doing very well. But what he found, and this is why, again, this is increasing difficulty. Right after he bought the business, his mother passed away. She got very sick for a period of about 4 or 5 months, and then she passed away. And he spent so much time with her, the business almost failed, because it is so difficult to have a business be successful without a lot of vigilance. And he had been a corporate person, so he was used to delegating. He delegated to his son, and his son wasn't quite ready. Fortunately, he could come back after about 6 months of helping with his mother's estate, his mother's decline, and salvage the business. So he's doing fine now. But you can read that story and you can see the extreme challenges that can be faced with a new venture. The left side, this is probably the most popular blog I've ever done, and it's called Downshift Role. The definition would be move from your most recent role to a lower level of responsibility and or lower title. Again, the most popular blog I've ever done, because this woman that I was working with realized there was a really good opportunity in California. And I said, okay, so are you ready to relocate? And she said, well, this is a job that's a couple of levels lower. And I said, well, I've got a couple questions for you. First of all, would the job be engaging? Would you be challenged and interested in going to work every day? She said, I would. Second, I said, is this a good company? Would you like the culture, the boss? She said, I know the boss, and I think I work really well with her. And the company's really a solid company with a very good culture. And said, okay, that's 2 green lights. Third question is, how about the personal factors? How about living in California and you'd be making less money because it's a lower level job? Could you do that and afford a life in California, Silicon Valley? She said, I'm in a 2-income situation. They pay well. I do just fine financially. And I said, she said, by the way, my son and daughter-in-law and grandson live right in this area, right in Silicon Valley. And I asked, did you mention that? And she said, well, no, that's an illegal question. I'm in human resources. They can't ask me that question. I said, well, they can't ask you that, but that couldn't stop you from offering that as one of the incentives to want to relocate to Silicon Valley for this company. So it was a Wednesday when she called me and she said, by the way, they're going to let me know Friday. They think I'm overqualified. So they're going to let me know Friday if I'm still in the running. And it was Wednesday when she told me that. I said, you've just told me that this is a really good job, a really good organization, and you'd be happy to move to California. Money is fine, and your grandson and son and daughter-in-law are there. I want you to call the hiring manager now. It's Wednesday. Because if you hold off, they're going to wonder if you also doubt that you'd fit in this job. Well, she did that. She called on the Wednesday, and she got the job offer on a Thursday. So the title of this blog is From Overqualified to When Can You Start? So take a look at it, because a lot of people who are further along in their careers find opportunities with a really good company, but it's a level or 2 down. Read that if you want to get some really good ideas on how to deal with the overqualified label. Portfolio life, the next one, redistribute time committed to work, community, and personal activities. And one of my clients that I highlighted in this blog is somebody who found a half-time job at a nonprofit, and the other half of his time he could spend with personal pursuits, giving back, leisure. Portfolio life is personal, professional, and community time redistributed so that you spend a lot less time at work and more time in life. Usually reserved for those of us a little bit further along and where money isn't as big a driver. New work, I have a client that at one time was a controller at an energy company, and now he is a professor. He teaches. And that was a big change for him, but he started out as a small experiment. He came as a guest lecturer. Before you know it, they said, we need you to teach. And one thing led to another, and he realized that he was happy as an instructor and really fell in love with teaching, which is quite different from being a controller at a energy company. But I think you'd have to, again, take a look and see for yourself what that transition is like. Sabbatical, I had a client that at age 50, he left his company. He had a package, and he decided he was totally burned out and that he would take a trip around the world with his wife because he had, again, a severance package that allowed him to have some time away. And you can still buy those plane tickets where you can go all the way around the world if you go the same direction the whole time. And they stayed he was 50 years old, but he stayed in youth hostels with his wife and did odd jobs and went all over the world. And after 6 months of going around the world, he was regenerated, rejuvenated, recharged. He was ready to go back, and he went back to actually contract work after that, but took on a series of contract work. So he went to new terms. But he said, I was so glad I did that sabbatical because I was really burned out. It's sort of like the great resignation now, where you feel like a lot of people are taking a break because they're just so burned out. rejuvenated him. Continuation, I did a story about my sister. She is 70 and it's stay in the same company or do the same work forever. Very similar or identical work environment and employment terms. By the way, I should go back and read the definition also of sabbatical. Sabbatical is intentional time off for personal reasons, professional renewal, and or development. So sorry, I forgot to mention what sabbatical is, but with my sister's story, I think she might just work till she's 80. You never know. But some people just say, I'm glad to know all my choices, but I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I'll just keep doing it. Other people are going to probably continue to do what they're doing, but they're bridging to something else. And I'll describe what that means now. Moving from one option to another over time. Establish bent timelines and personal work and financial benchmarks. Build bridges to the next step while on the current path. I'd have to say this is me. I did a case study of myself because when I turned 56, I went to new venture. I started my solo practice at age 56, and at age 65, I decided, okay, I am going to now shrink my practice, and I'm going to move to a portfolio life. And so because I had spent about 8 years in that practice, building the practice of solo consulting, I could just say, I'm going to take fewer clients on. I'm going to shrink my practice to what is now about 2 clients a day, and then grow the other elements of a portfolio life, which is besides working the form you want, learning development. I'm taking a lot of OLLI classes. I am also giving back to my church, doing some tutoring, mentoring, and work with the History Theater on the board. I'm doing yoga and playing hockey, and also enjoying movies and streaming on Netflix and all those leisure things. So anybody that wants to know about portfolio life, you can read my study, my case study at the end. So that's the 9 choices. And again, you might have some questions on these, but I want to work you through the how-to next, so that if you have questions, I'll take you through the process of both a transition and a transformation, because a transformation would represent a radical shift. Transition would be more of a minor shift, a more familiar path, and you can see the path on the right. It always starts with self-assessment. We have to think about what are our skills, our interests and values, what's our history, what does our history teach us about who we are, what we have been, what we've liked, what we haven't liked. I like Soren Kierkegaard's comment that life is lived forward but understood backwards. And I like to say, look back at your 10 top achievements. What do they say about you in terms of your skills, your interests, your values, and what really turns you on about various kinds of work that you do? Research, we have to use the internet and conversations with people to figure out what is this maybe new organization we'd like to occupy, or a new direction, but it's still similar to what we've been doing. You've got to focus, and I'll give you the 5 questions that you need to focus on when you're networking. We have to plan out how we're going to go about going to the marketplace, develop our resume, develop the LinkedIn profile, LinkedIn information, as well as networking skills and interviewing skills, negotiating skills, develop ourselves, network like crazy, campaign. I think since 65 to 80% of jobs are found through networking, that's probably how most people should spend most of their time, about 70% of their time networking. And also, this is the happy ending, and then the beyond landing, grow your career. Again, I can cover any of these in the Q&A section, but I'm going to move on to transformation now. Same starting point. It's always going to be self-assessment first, and then naming new possibilities. What are the possibilities? I've sometimes brought to people the strong interest inventory. Other times they've brought ideas to me and thinking I could do this, that, or the other thing. And what I've sometimes said is, if you take a pebble and drop the pebble in the water, right under that pebble is a job just like the job you had in the same kind of organization. What's one ripple out? What's 2 ripples out? Where there's still some relationship to where the pebble fell into the water, but it's starting to get out a little further and further. This might be 3 or 4 ripples out, but there's still some relevance to our history. So new possibilities, researching those on the internet and through conversations. This next section comes from Herminia Ibarra, who in about 2003, I think it was a game changer. And she said, don't get analysis paralysis and just spend your time navel gazing and figuring out, doing exercises all the time. She said, this should be action biased to do a transformation. And in her book, Working Identity, there's all sorts of case studies of radical transformations that adults make that are 10, 15, 20, 30 years beyond college. Craft small experiments before you make a bigger commitment. Try it to see what it's like. Shift connections. Don't keep going back to the same connections that might be very familiar to you, but shift connections to people that do what you're thinking about doing and let them guide you. And after you've had enough small experiments, after you've had enough conversations and guides to show you the new ways, see if it makes sense. That'd be the third part of Ibarra's model. She'd say craft experiments, shift connections, and then make sense. Should I keep doing this? Does this make sense to keep doing this? If it does, maybe you go for it. But if it doesn't, you have to circle back and go back to maybe self-assessment and find a different path. But I highly encourage you to read that book, Working Identity. I think it's liberating. It expands people's thinkings, boundaries. And I know, Kate, you're a big fan of it because you and I have done a lot of career work together and in different paths we've taken. But we keep coming back to Working Identity by Ibarra. So let me talk about the three main factors. And I shared these with you when I talked about from overqualified to when can you start. These are always three really important factors when you're considering, what do I want to do next? The job, just like I mentioned, the woman, I said, is the job engaging? Would I look forward to going to work? Does it get me really interested? Does it use my preferred skills? Is this the job that's going to get me excited about going to work on Monday? Number two, the organization. And I often say this is an organization, meaning it's the culture, it's the health of the organization, it's the boss, it's how this place feels and how strong it is in the marketplace, how good an organization, how proud you would be or otherwise working for this organization. Would you like to attach your name to this organization? Because the organization, to an extent, becomes your identity. Where you work is, to an extent, who you are. And the third question, the personal, that's typically looking at the money and looking at the location, looking at the hours that you'd be working. I mentioned this woman that was going to move to California, and most people are very nervous about, would you really be okay relocating? Well, a lot of people these days are commuting. Well, that certainly has personal implications. There's a lot of people that commute, and it affects their personal life and, how much time is left for my family. So personal is the location, the time, the money, the space, and so on. And then your network has these questions for you. Now, over the years, I've had the time to, it's almost like I go back and forth with my clients. If I offer good advice, they'll nod. If I offer bad advice, they'll push back, because these are executives, right? They're not shy about telling me if I'm right or wrong. And so over the years, this next one, and really most of the ones I've shared with you so far, have stood the test of time. And these 5 questions are typically what you're going to get. The first question is almost always going to be, what happened? If you're thinking about a change, or if you've already changed, tell them about it and be honest, but don't slam your former employer. Be very careful to take the high road and have a shorter and a longer version. And I spend a lot of time with my clients. For most of my 21 years at Right Management, where I started, it was people that are laid off. So I had to say, don't slam yourself and don't slam them, but find a way to script it, write it down, practice it, share it with other people, and be ready for the longer version, because they might say, well, tell me more. So be ready for both versions, practice it, script it, get that down, because that's the gatekeeper. If you can't get past that, then it's hard to get, then they start to lose trust with you, or they start to wonder about you if you can't give them a cogent explanation of why you left or why you're thinking about leaving. Usually the short version is just fine. They'll ask you, what do you want to do next? And they want to know a specific role. Tell me the title. Tell me, help me understand what specifically you want to do next, so that I can latch onto it and make the right kind of referrals to the right kind of people if you're in my network. And then this next one's kind of a branding statement. What makes you a strong candidate for this work? What are you especially good at, passionate about, and where's your proof? So again, even if you're making a change, you still bring skills to work. You still bring attributes to your work. But they want to know, if you're talking about a particular direction, they want to hear some excitement in your voice. They want to hear some passion, so you're not looking like a lost soul, but somebody who has some excitement. Maybe you don't know everything you need to know about it, and you're searching, you're learning, but they want to feel your energy. They want to feel your excitement about it. and also hear about where your skills are, where your strengths are, what you bring to the table. And then where do you want to work? They want to know what size, and they like numbers too. Tell me what size of organization would be a good fit for you. And if you say small, medium, or large, they'll say, does that mean 100,000 employees or 500 million in revenue, a billion? Oftentimes people think in numbers of employees or revenue figures. Stage, I mean life cycle stage. Are they early stage, mature stage, turnaround stage? What industry? And people like to know, do you want to stay in your industry or change industries? The culture, what kind of a culture fits you best? And what location do you prefer? And again, sometimes that's local, relocation, or commuting. So those questions, and then they finally ask you, how can I help you? And what I've put in brackets here is 4 really good words that you can use. How can you help me? Visibility, let people know I'm looking. Information, I've named some companies that I'm interested in. What can you tell me about those companies? Advice, if you were in my shoes, and most people have been in the shoes of a job changer at some point, either on their own or been pushed out. Advice, and then referrals at the end. You notice I put referrals last because referrals are very personal. And when somebody's about to give you a referral, they're thinking, am I comfortable giving this referral? You're going to represent me. It's very personal. And are you ready for me to give you that referral? Are you ready to represent me? Well, because when I give you my name to use, you're representing me. So it's very personal. So they want to get comfortable in all these things. And the most important, of course, is the referral. So here's the 5 ways I think people are judged. The first is ability. Can you do this work, and can you prove it with your examples? I usually use CAR, you could use STAR, but challenge, action, results. Story. Want people to think about a 3-part model for communicating your abilities. I always say start with a list of the top 5 or 10 things that you think an organization wants if they're hiring. What are the 5 to 10 things that they want? What do they need? Start with that. And then your abilities. In the middle column, what do you offer? Where you say, I've been there, done that, or I can do that, or I have transferable skills, or I'm a quick study. I can do that. So what they need first, what you offer in your abilities second, and then your stories third. And the third column is maybe one story for each of the 5 to 10 things that they need, which is a challenge, action, result format, where you can say, to the extent possible, I've been there, I've done that. I've got the ability, I've got the proven ability because I've had relevant experience that matches what you need. Needs, qualifications, and stories. They want to know you're motivated. If you have the abilities without the drive, especially if this group looking at this video is in the mid to late stage of your career, there's always a question, are you still passionate when you're in your 50s or 60s, let's say? And there's a question, do you still have the drive? Maybe you've got good stories from the past and that's predictive, but are you still motivated today, and will you be motivated tomorrow and the next day and beyond? So motivation is about your achievements and your energy, and then fit. Oftentimes recruiters would tell us fit is the most important thing. I'd have recruiters come every month to write management, and the executives that were in the room, 30 of them, 40, would say, what's the number one thing you're looking for in a candidate? And they'd almost always say fit. And then you say, what is fit? Well, I guess the simplest way to say fit is it's how you do the things you do. And let me give you an example. A recruiter would say, I can get 3 candidates, my finalists they'll all have the ability, they'll all have the motivation, but the real kicker will be who will fit this culture, who will fit this boss, who will fit these coworkers, who will fit this work climate, the vendors, the customers, you name it. And fit is, again, a subjective word, and it could be a dangerous word for discrimination. So there's a very charged word these days, especially with the discriminatory issues in the workplace. But still, no matter what your situation, you do have to think, okay, if I've got ability and motivation, but I don't fit, it's not going to work. So that's what hiring managers are thinking about. Will this person fit our culture? And then next, competitive. With each candidate, you're not competing against the job specs. You're competing against other candidates. So it's important to always remember that if you don't get the job, it might not be that you weren't the most qualified candidate. By comparison to your competition, they might have said this other person fits better or somehow has a better profile than you. And then connected. Why connected? Well, connected people are more trustworthy because strangers are harder to know whether or not they're going to be who they say they are. So connected means you have a sponsor. And that's why, again, 65 to 80%, that was 30 years plus, it's always been 65 to 80% probability that your next job comes through connections, because trust comes from connections. And employers want to be able to trust you, and they trust you by hearing the good words of people that advocate for you. So it kind of gets down to that. So last thing, and then I'm going to open up to questions. 4 keys. I think structure is very important. And I've given you structure for a transition, structure for a transformation, and the structure that speaks to 9 career alternatives also helps you. And I've tried to share with you a number of structures that I think will be helpful to you. And again, you'll go back to my website, georgedow.com, 2018, and you can see all these how-tos in 3 blogs and then 9 of the case studies. Support. I think it's really important to have people that you can get support from, that it's really emotionally difficult. All these years I've spent in this profession, I think I felt like I've been a supportive person to people whose emotional embers have sort of gone out, or they're just a flicker, and you feel so small when you've been laid off, terminated, or you quit and you don't have something new. You need support to kind of keep the flames of your self-confidence and belief in yourself going, because it's so easy to feel beat up going through this process. And then creativity. I've given you 9 different avenues, and also just sometimes you have to go around and over or under instead of just keep banging your head against the wall. You need to be creative about how you deal with obstacles. And then finally, courage, because when you think about a transformation, a radical change, it takes a lot of courage. I think of a metaphor of a person in a trapeze bar. We get so close, and then we don't want to let go, so we pull back, and then we get really close, and at some point you got to let go of that trapeze bar to get to the other side. So it takes a lot of courage to let go of the familiar and move on to the next spot. So with that, I'm going to stop, because that was my half hour of lecture, and I'm going to open up to questions now and see what I can do to escape from this and try to move into, did I do it successfully?
We still have your screen, so
I got to get out of my screen, which, let's see. Am I out of the screen now?
Yes, yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Oh, now you're back in.
Oh, I don't want to be back in. Let's see. Maybe.
There. That's perfect.
Am I good now?
You're good now, yes.
Okay.
So thank you so much, George. That was wonderful to just kind of hear your approach and just understanding the options people have. I'm struck we have so much conversation today around the Great Resignation and how people are just weary. I mean, they're weary from the pandemic, of course, but they're also saying work has to shift for me. Work isn't working for me. And I get a sense that so much of what the focus is on leaving and stepping away from something. But what I hear in your conversation is that what we're talking about is going towards something and thinking about those questions. So could you talk a little bit about just what are some of those important questions people need to ask themselves as they think about what's next?
Yeah, big question is, do I stay or do I go? Can I do this bridging out to something else while I'm employed, or should I quit and just give it 100%? And what's interesting is that I think if you picture that you're over here and there's this other job or opportunity over here, and in between there's kind of a moat, or there's a valley. What I often say to people that are employed that are thinking about moving over here to the other side is, it's like tossing down mattresses, and you toss down the self-assessment mattress, and you get to know yourself better. You toss down the research mattress, and you start to look for what are other opportunities. Maybe you do informational interviews. Maybe you craft experiments, and it's like tossing down mattresses so that you can either jump and there's something to break your fall, because you've done your self-assessment, you've done your informational interviews, you've done your resume, your LinkedIn, you've done all your foundational things that represent a cushion that'll break your fall so you won't crash into the basement, but rather if you jump, you can climb up and put your, if you jump early, you know, it's going to be intense, but you won't hurt yourself as much. You can create some steps. And other people just put down so many mattresses of self-assessment, market research, resume, LinkedIn, informational interviewing, and then job interviewing, so that they can literally walk across to the other side. So when you get pushed off, you bang, you crash into the concrete down below. That's pretty hard on people, very difficult on people. Then you have to build your steps up. But I suggest some metaphorical mattress tossing in order to build a cushion to either be able to walk across or jump and something breaks your fall. That's just my best way to approach it. I have quit jobs before. I've quit a job, and sometimes you have to do that because you can't stand it anymore, and you can't find any time or energy to do those things to build the mattresses up. So sometimes that makes sense. But if you can build a bridge for yourself, I think that's a little bit safer, a little healthier if you can do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's about recalibrating some things. So you can take a big leap, but maybe you can also take small steps in those mattresses. Like you're building that process to allow yourself to make a change.
That's right. And you can see all that in my first 3 blogs in 2018. I speak to this process in more detail.
Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of people, so there's the people who are just ready to leap and they're not necessarily looking, but then there's also for people, I mean, inertia can be a big deterrent. You know, it's especially if our jobs are not a great fit, but they're not so bad that you have no choice to leave. Can you talk a little bit about overcoming inertia?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's hard to do this on our own. And a lot of times people they get caught up in analysis paralysis. They're doing all these exercises. They maybe get workbooks and they're just spending so much time writing and writing and writing. I think 2 things that are really important is to move to goal partners support, whether it be a coach or a success team, and then taking the actions that we've talked about, the actions that are in my 3 blogs. But I think that it starts with saying, maybe if I just keep myself alone, I won't be chipping away at this. I'll give you an example. I went to a workshop once and they said, you know, you go to a workshop and you're all fired up by the end of the workshop, and then 2 weeks later, you're back down to ground zero, because we tend to lose things if we just go to a workshop or maybe read a book. But if you're either with a coach or a success team, the line can go up, because it's almost like scallops or waves, because we have to be accountable to talk to our coach or our goal partners, and then we maybe slide a little bit, but we have a meeting in a week, so we have to meet this person. I got to meet this person because I've been given assignments, and then I meet and okay, I made some progress, but I'll regress for a while. Well, the accountability coach or the accountability partners keeps it more of waves going upwards rather than a book or a workshop and then 2 weeks later, bang, we're back down to zero. So I think it's people, and not just committing to ourselves, but committing to other people to continue the process and have accountability partners that really makes a difference. Because I prefer action bias than just doing more exercises, more reading, more navel gazing.
Yes. So we have a great question from the audience. She wants to know, can you give some examples of what it means to craft experiments?
Sure. I think I'll give you an example of a volunteer thing I did. We were in Argentina, and my son said, we need a dog. There's stray dogs everywhere in Argentina. And I said, oh, a dog. Yeah, you're with us 2 more years, and then you're off to college, and we'll have a dog for 10 years. We didn't want that burden. So we said, well, you know, I remember the Ibarra model as craft experiments and shift connections. So I said, okay, maybe we could raise a service dog. And you know what we did is we went over to learn about helping paws. And the experiments that we ran were to go to the training sessions and actually be there and watch what the sessions were all about. And then I also ended up shifting connections by talking to the instructors, talking to the people that train the dogs as volunteers, and also the instructors. So it's actually go on site. And when it comes to jobs, I think some of the best experiments would be if somebody could allow you to let you shadow them and have a long conversation about what is your typical day like, and like, can I even accompany you to some of your work that you're doing? And again, it depends on what kind of work they're doing and how comfortable they are having a guest to actually go with them. Or the other experiment might be, I think there's a lot of volunteer experiences that can mimic what you do in paid occupations. So sometimes you can be volunteering as an experiment. Try something, whether it's sales, development, leading a team. You can do it as a volunteer sometimes and get the same kind of skill development and say, I'd use these same skills if I took on this kind of job. I can experiment over here, see if I like it, and then use that on my resume and my interviews, that I've got transferable skills, because as in this volunteer experience, I did the same kind of things I would be doing in this job. So there's a couple of different thoughts, one for volunteer, one for paid work.
Yeah, and I love that. And it could also be stretch assignments or volunteering for a committee at work, or giving yourself those opportunities to see what it's like to do a different kind of role or project, so you can also not only build that experience, which you can put on your resume and LinkedIn profile, but also see if it's a good fit.
That's right. And you and I know that school oftentimes has simulations too. And University of Minnesota would have some classes where you could simulate some of these things.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes going back to school, we know that lifelong learning is important for us. I mean, we can't stay doing the same thing the same way we've always done it. So finding those opportunities to learn and grow, but a certificate program or maybe taking a class to see if something is interesting to you might also help open up your eyes.
Yeah, school more and more is trying to be applied and real world oriented. So yeah, that's good. Any other questions that you got down there?
Yeah. So, I think too that, we've seen some people who have been just thrown into this, and, whether they're laid off and they're needing to navigate this new reality and maybe didn't prepare for it. I get a sense when we can be intentional, it's a little easier. But what happens when you're just thrown into the mix and suddenly you're doing a career change?
Yeah, I've had a lot of clients like that. And in fact, I did a workshop on that very topic about dealing with the transition and the emotional aspect of it. And I often refer to the work of William Bridges. And when you're in a transition, a lot of times you have to understand that there's three parts to it. One is the ending of what has been, and there's some grief to that. There's some waves of grief that come to that. The next stage is not a new beginning necessarily, but a neutral zone or a wilderness where you feel confusion and some emptiness, and then eventually the new beginning. So what I encourage people to do is to recognize that there's an emotional element. There's a time to regroup, and you might not be in your best self, your best mindset right away. You might need a little time to regroup and recognize that if you go too quickly, you might not put your best foot forward. So to try to get grounded both emotionally and intellectually, so that emotionally you're not desperate, that you're not sounding depressed or angry. The worst thing is to come across angry and resentful and have a chip on your shoulder. And that might take a little bit of time and understanding. And then that there's some ambiguity and some confusion, but to maybe not jump from the ending to a new beginning, because some people I know have jumped right into a new job that has all the same bad qualities of the last job. If you're not careful, the devil can sometimes be your next job. So you have to try to get some objectivity and perspective on what represents a good job, a good organization, and good personal factors, so that I take good care of myself and don't just jump from loss to some new thing. You got to know yourself and what's good for yourself, and not just be desperate and take the first thing.
Mm-hmm. And it's also the story you tell, and you mentioned that in your presentation too, about just how do you frame it, what do you say, what is the story around this? And I think it's having that positive piece of being able to tell a story that makes sense for an employer, but then also for you, so you're at peace with some of those changes.
Yeah, right away within the first session, I'll find myself saying, we need to get this reason for leaving statement so that it's clean. It's not slamming you, it's not slamming your former boss. Mm-hmm. It's got to be the high road.
So George, any last words of wisdom as we close out and go to a 10-minute mindfulness break?
Oh, that sounds good. Well, my advice is go to your mindfulness break, because again, this is stressful stuff, But I would encourage you to feel free. It's all free and there's no strings attached. Go to my blog, georgedow.com, 2018, and the entire year was dedicated to this topic of 3 how-to blogs and then 9 on each of these 9 career alternatives. And good luck to everybody. I wish you the best.
Thank you so much, George.
Okay, that's a wrap. Take care.
That's a wrap. Yeah, and we've got the link to those blogs in the chat. So thanks everybody for attending, and we hope you check out everything that was shared.
Thank you. Thanks for coming all.
Bye-bye.
Well, welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and dive in. I know our session is just beginning and people will keep funneling in, but welcome again. My name is Megan Mell. I'm the Director of Alumni Experiences in the College of Liberal Arts, and I will be your moderator tonight for our session, More Than a Bubble Bath, Strategies for Building Resilience in the Face of Work Stress and Burnout. And I am very excited about this session. It's been a difficult time for many of us, and it's a very relevant topic. This session is brought to you by Happy with Work, which teaches organizations mindful, positive approaches to fostering well-being in their staff and serving their clientele. Thank you to Happy with Work for sponsoring the UMAA's Career Month. Now, during this session, we do ask the audience that you leave your camera off and remain muted. We will have a 15-minute Q&A at the conclusion of the presentation, and then during the presentation, you can drop any questions you have for our presenter in the Q&A tab found at the right side of your screen, kind of towards the bottom. Or during the Q&A portion of the session, you can certainly request to turn on your camera, unmute, and ask a question directly if that is your preference. So now I would just like to introduce our speaker for tonight. I'm so glad to welcome CLA alum Laura Harder as tonight's speaker. Laura is the founder of Happy with Work, LLC. She is a certified compassion fatigue therapist and a psychology instructor at Metropolitan State University. Having worked in human services, Laura witnessed firsthand how the demands of the job combined with dynamics of the workplace can lead to good practitioners leaving the field. As a researcher, she explores the causes of burnout in human services and the effect of practitioner stress on their success with clients. She now works with organizations to eliminate extraneous stressors to allow their staff to be well and serve well. By using psychology theory to create self-care techniques, Laura's presentation style is as warm and interactive as it is informative. She believes self-care is a lens we use rather than a thing we do. Laura, thank you so much for being here. I am going to turn things over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Megan. And those of you, if you're able to, if you'd like to spotlight me or pin me. Oh, actually, now I think I might be full screen. I think that's how this works. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I'm so excited to be working with my alma mater. This is just, I'm very happy to be here sharing, my own expertise with my fellow Gophers. It's a happy spot for me to be. So as an instructor, I always like to get things started by having you all think a little bit about your own experiences. So I'd like you to start by just either thinking or jotting down 3 things that are particularly stressful about work. And we're going to come back to this, and you don't have to share if you don't want to. But just jot them down for now so you can kind of refer to them during the presentation. And then once you've jotted down 3 things that are particularly stressful, I'd like you to move on to writing down 3 things that you love about work, 3 of your favorite things about your job. Give you guys another 30 seconds or so. You don't have to choose the absolute best or the absolute worst things, just 3 things that come to mind. So I know that at last year's, at last year's Connections event, there was another seminar on what is burnout and where is it caused. And just in case other folks weren't there, I just want to give very, very bare bones basic definitions here. So we're all on the same page as what burnout is and what it isn't. So burnout is categorized as having 3 core components. The first one being emotional exhaustion. So emotional exhaustion is just that feeling of being used up at the end of the day. When you get home, you're just so tired. And it also can be categorized by having like a short fuse, right? So that's the emotion piece, is feeling like you just don't have anything left to give. The next one is depersonalization. So this is when you're feeling like, I just need my own space, right? Even if you're an extrovert like me, you're just feeling like, I just want to lay on the couch and not talk to anybody, right? This also can look like cynicism. So feeling a little cynical, like, yeah, right. Not believing people, kind of, not giving the benefit of the doubt, feeling a little bit more negative toward and callous toward people. Last one is a decreased sense of self-accomplishment, personal accomplishment in your profession. So feeling like what you do doesn't matter, feeling like, you're not making any real progress, wondering what is this all about. Those are all characteristics of burnout. So these are actual measures from an actual burnout measure. These are some actual statements that you would be measured on. So burnout sounds like, gosh, I feel used up at the end of the day. I feel trapped by my job. I don't really care what happens to some clients, customers, whoever. I don't really care about the outcome of my job. I deal very, very effectively with problems at work. So that would be, the opposite of burnout. I feel drained from my work. I've become more callous toward people since taking this job. Another protective factor here, I have accomplished many worthwhile things at this job, and I feel like I'm working too hard, right? Like I just am working so hard and it's not really slowing down. So these are the statements that you would hear if you're feeling burnt out, or a colleague was burnt out. Now, what causes burnout? There are a lot of studies on what causes burnout, and Maslach and Leiter are 2 of the pioneers in burnout research. Maslach is actually the one that made the Maslach burnout inventory. She's the first one to actually measure burnout as an actual construct, and they've kind of dwindled it down to 6 core causes of burnout, or factors that influence someone's burnout. And they call it the 6 areas of work life. And when I tell people about this theory, it feels like, oh, yes, it's that. That is what I'm feeling, or that's what I'm missing from work. So I always like to tell people about this because it feels like you're justified, right? It feels valid. So the first one being workload. So you want enough work to be engaged and excited in your work, but you don't want so much that you feel overwhelmed or like you're drowning in it. So it's kind of finding that sweet spot. The next one is a sense of community. Do you have a sense of community at work? Do you have people you can connect with, that you feel like you can trust? And that can be your boss. It doesn't have to be. It can be, people that work underneath you. It can be your colleagues. It can be people in a different department. It can be people that you work with outside of the organization that you collaborate with. As long as you have people that you feel get it in your corner, that's a sense of community at work. A sense of control. So this is supposed to be red tape. Feeling like you have autonomy in your job. Feeling like you can do things like, hey, Friday afternoon, I have a dentist appointment. Is it okay that I leave for a couple hours, right? Not feeling so tied down to your job. It also feels like autonomy to make decisions. So feeling like you're trusted by your boss or your colleagues to make decisions on what to do next in your role. A sense of reward, feeling like you are compensated appropriately for your position, as well as acknowledged on a social level. So feeling like your boss, feeling like your colleagues are acknowledge your importance in the organization, and what it is that you do really matters, and that you're really part of the team. So feeling like that's a sense of social reward, feeling recognized for the important work that you do. a sense of fairness. So fairness being that decisions that are made in the organization are made based on merit, not necessarily who you know, and that even if you don't agree with the decision, that you're at least feel like your voice is being heard. And lastly, a sense of values. So we all have values, right? Values dictate how and what we do in a day. And sometimes values rub up against each other. And when this happens between your values and what the organization values, or what that role values in you, it can, if you deal with that kind of tension for a long period of time, it can lead to burnout. So quick question, you can throw it up in the chat if you want to take a guess. But out of these 6, there's workload, community, control, reward, fairness, and values. Which one do you think is the most predictive of whether or not someone is going to stay at a job? Whether or not someone's going to leave? If you had none of them except one, what's the one that matters for retention? Anyone want to guess? Workload, community. Community is my favorite because I'm an extrovert. Getting a lot of community. It's actually fairness. Fairness, if people feel like they understand why decisions are being made, they can kind of get behind you. I think it's actually really fascinating. And I think the reason why is that these other needs, you can kind of get met in other areas, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more later. So things like community, you can have friends outside of work, right? And get that social need met. I personally really struggle with not having a sense of community, or having too high of a workload, or not enough workload. But fairness is the one that consistently is predictive of turnover, which I think is quite fascinating. Okay, so now the whole reason we're here, right? I'm going to give you my patented 5 steps to combating burnout. Are you guys ready? That's why we're all here, right? Okay, I'm joking. There's actually no steps. I'm sorry to get your hopes up. The reason there are no, sorry, Marissa. The reason that there aren't any steps, because if they existed, none of us would be experiencing burnout, right? And so, like the title says, it's more than a bubble bath, right? It's more than yoga. And when I worked in the shelter downtown Minneapolis, I got so frustrated by seminars on burnout that I would feel like, oh, I'm going to go and I'm going to leave knowing exactly how to take care of myself, right? And after years of working there, years of seminars where they say, take a deep breath, you'll feel fine, right? Just do some yoga, do some stretching, and doing years and years of research, I realized that it has nothing to do with what you do, right? There's no magic pill to combat burnout. It has everything to do with how you're doing things. And not only how you do things like self-care, like a bubble bath, right? If that's how you define bubble bath. I always like using bubble baths and yoga because I personally love bubble baths and I love yoga. I do yoga regularly. But they have kind of turned into this like cartoon of what self-care looks like. And it has nothing to do, I mean, if you're taking a bubble bath, but sitting there dwelling on this presentation you have the next day in front of this group that you really hate, that bubble bath is not going to do you any good, right? If you're doing yoga, but sitting there, stressing out about, your boss and how horrible they are and how micromanaging they are, it's not going to solve any problems, right? So it's everything to do with the lens that you're using, which is what, Megan said in my bio, is that I believe that self-care is a perspective we take. It's a lens that we use to see the world, to see our family, to see our work. And it has everything to do with how we're prioritizing ourselves and our mental health above anything else, right? And how is it that we can do what's best for us in every single interaction that we have? So what can we do if there's no 5 steps, right? First thing, so I asked a few clients actually that I worked with. I was like, what is the most helpful to hear? Because I have 30 minutes here. I've got 30 minutes with my fellow alums. What should I be saying? And most people think that it's really helpful to be reminded that it's more of a system problem than it is a you problem, right? Yes, of course, there are things that we can do to make ourselves feel better, to make sure that we're not being too stressed out, to recognize our triggers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But in reality, if you're in a bad job, in a bad organization, there's only so much self-care that you can do to get through the day. It's more than you. It is more than you. So remembering that and being validated in that. Remembering again that self-care is not a thing we do. If you're waiting until 5 p.m. to get to go to the gym to run it out, it's not going to do you much good, right? You need to learn how to cope through every single interaction in your day. And interactions not only with other people, but with yourself. Those conversations that you're having internally really matter. And so that being said, there are still things you can do to cope. So I know you're here for some strategies, so I'm going to give you some, okay? The first one being control. I know I mentioned control is one of the predictors of burnout. So take a look at that list that I had you write, those 3 things. And I'd like you to think about the elements that surround those stressors and consider what is within your control around those. And examine what ones are not in your control. Is it within your control? Is your boss's personality within your control? Right? Is, I don't know, the way you schedule your clients. That's within your control, right? When you open up Outlook for me is the big trigger. I don't know if anyone else has that, but every time I hear the Outlook chime, I had to turn it off my phone. So examine what's not in your control and consider, is this something that you can accept, right, in this job? Is this something that you can cope with? Can you figure out a way to live with this? And only you have those answers, right? The next thing that's also helpful, and I hated it when people would tell me this, so stick with me. I'm going to try to make it a little easier to swallow, is meet your own needs. Now, this sounds deceivingly simple, but it's really hard, right? And the reason why it's really important to pay attention to other needs of yours outside of work, within and out of work, is because if you're getting certain needs met, it's going to reduce your overall stress load, right? And when our overall stress load is reduced, we're less reactive. And when we're less reactive, we're less likely to take on more and more stress. So it's going to lower your overall stress load, and it's going to help you keep perspective. So doing things like eating well. You know, I was talking with my brother-in-law last week about his experience with burnout, and he's like, Laura, I haven't made myself food in 3.5 weeks. I just am so exhausted. I need to just order in every night. And I'm like, that's hard. You know, you need a salad, right? You need to eat some vegetables. And so just making sure that you eat, right? That's another thing, you know, just making sure. If I don't call my husband, he'll remember to feed the kids, but he'll forget to feed himself, you know, making sure that you're eating well. Getting social needs met, that sense of community, right? If you don't have it at work, make sure you're getting it met somewhere else. Make sure you're connecting with friends. Make sure you're meeting colleagues, things like this, right? You know, network outside of your job if you're not getting that sense of community within it. A sense of spirituality, however that you define that, right? We all have a need for higher level, higher order thinking of, you know, connecting to something bigger than us. And however that seems to fit for you, whether it's journaling, whether it's church, whether it's meditation, whether it's walking in nature. You know, I have a good friend of mine who once told me that nature is her church. And I'm like, that's beautiful, right? Yeah, go for a hike, connect with whatever it is that's bigger than you. And lastly, make sure you're getting sleep. Now, this is easier said than done, because poor sleep is also a symptom of burnout. So however you can get your body to rest before bed is critical. Turning off all screens for at least an hour more if you can, right? Not sleeping next to your phone, having a cup of tea or whatever you need to kind of tell your body, okay, it's time to fall asleep, right? I am a huge firm believer. We listen to audiobooks in our house every single night. And there's something about the guy that narrates Game of Thrones that he puts me to bed every single time. And so the other thing I wanted to mention is that not only taking care of these needs does it lower your overall stress load, it also helps you keep perspective. So when life becomes bigger than work is not so big, right? It doesn't feel like the end all be all that, oh my gosh, life is horrible because work is horrible. When you're connecting with people, when you're connecting with your spirituality, when your body feels good, when you have hobbies, work is not as big of a deal as it can be when you're not getting those other needs met. Okay, so a couple more exercises. So some people need like homework, right? The first thing I'm going to have you do is, I should have grabbed myself an empty piece of paper. Okay. If you have a piece of paper, draw a circle in the middle of it. In that circle, I'd like you to write the 3 things that you wrote down that are the most stressful parts of your job, okay? I put X, Y, Z because I'm not going to name names tonight. This is being recorded. After that, I'd like you to draw a circle outside of it. I think you can maybe guess where we're going. And I'm going to write the 3 things that I love about work. So I wrote Megan, Marissa, and Melissa because they've been big helps. And actually, I'm not sure if Melissa Green, who's in here and contributing, if you're the Melissa I worked with to help, but regardless, I appreciate your your participation here. And then the last thing, we're going to do one more. My daughter would be so excited. She loves Target. I'm teaching her well. One more. I'd like you to put 3 things, at least 3. You can fill it in later. 3 things that you love outside of work. Okay. This one I can share. I have kayaking, Lando, he's my dog, and walks with my kids, which is true. I love walks with the kids, unless it's really cold. So now I'd like you to do this. Okay. Make a circle. Notice, think of this as your attention and your focus. Okay. It can only cover this size. So you can choose. Most of our attention during the day goes to that middle circle, right? When we're stressed out, our automatic psyche is ingrained to look for threat. When we are stressed, we're looking for threat. So we're looking in that middle circle. That's only going to increase our stress more. So what you can do is you can force your attention to pull outside of that middle circle. Look at the positives of your job. What is it that you love about your job? Focus on that for 5 minutes. Let yourself do something you enjoy for 5 minutes. And if you're having a horrible day and there's nothing you can do to escape it, think about what you're going to do after work. Look at that outside circle and consider what is it that you're going to do after work that's going to make you feel better. Oh, that's this one. One's supposed to be the spotlight. Okay, so that's kind of like an attentional spotlight practice that I created for, okay, you only have this much focus. Choose what goes in it. That's within your control, right? That your boss can't take from you. The be here now. I know I kind of teased about take a deep breath. You're fine. The thing about deep breathing is that you have to do it correctly. If you take a deep breath from up here, like you're running, you're actually igniting your stress response. I'm not going to nerd out and talk about all the different, variation, the parts of the nervous system, but just trust me, if you're breathing from up here, from your chest and your lungs, you're telling your body that you're running away from a threat. Okay. Nothing wrong with that if you're trying to get some cardio, but if what you're trying to do is take a deep breath to calm down after a horrible conversation with your manager, what you need to do is take a belly breath. So I'm going to stand up. I'd like everyone, let's see, can you see me? Hang on. Right down here, right below your belly button is where I'd like you to put your hands. And when you take a deep breath, try to make a move, kind of like a Santa Claus belly, okay? Like a balloon in your belly. And what we're going to do is I'm going to have you take 3 deep breaths with me, and then we're going to get to Q&A, okay? So but before we do it, I'm going to walk you through it, okay? One time. First thing we could do is we're going to completely exhale all the stale air out of our lungs and out of our belly, okay? And then I'm going to say, okay, inhale, full belly. So you're going to make your belly really big. And then I'm going to say, inhale into chest. So you can feel the difference between breathing in your stomach and breathing in your chest. And then we're going to full exhale. We're going to do that 3 times. Ideally, you'll breathe in through your nose, exhale out your mouth. Don't get caught up in that. If you're like me and you have asthma and that's too hard, don't worry about it. Just breathe. Just breathe. The only other thing is put your palms up, like you're reaching out to a cute little puppy that you don't want them to be threatened, right? When you have your palms up, you're telling your brain that there's no threat. There's nothing to be ready to fight against if you have your palms up, okay? So everyone, palms up, get comfy, close your eyes. You don't have to close your eyes, but just don't look at your phone, essentially. Look down, gaze downward, don't pay attention to anything. Don't be reading notes or anything. Just don't be distracted is what I'm trying to say. Okay, get comfortable. We'll start with a full exhale. Inhale, full belly. Inhale into chest. And exhale. Inhale, full belly. Inhale into chest. And exhale. Last one. Inhale, full belly. Into chest. And exhale. Now, before you open your eyes or come back to me, just take a minute to kind of feel your body sitting in the chair. Feel your hands on your lap, your feet on the ground. And ideally, you would do this before and after, and you'd feel just how big of a difference those 3 breaths can make. So when you're ready, open your eyes. And so 3 breaths. I don't know about you, but I feel you can tell my voice, right? I'm no longer up here really excited, kind of slowing down. 3 breaths takes less than a minute. It usually takes me about 45 seconds to walk people through that. So if you do that every time you fill up your coffee, every time you walk to the bathroom, just do that a few times a day, or right after a tough conversation, it'll bring your heart rate back down. So at least you can move forward with your day, not being revved up in your stress response. So here's my contact information. Like I said, half hour is not a lot of time to try to solve burnout. But I'm hoping that I gave you at least a few tips that you can take with you. Tomorrow's Friday, yippee, right? But that you could take with you tomorrow and into next week to try to reposition your focus, reposition your perspective, and give you some more energy moving forward. So please feel free to write down my contact information. I'm looking forward to connecting. And so if you have any questions, feel free to put them up in the Q&A, as well as, any general comments or things that you want me to go over again. I'm happy to help. I'm here. That's what I'm here for.
Hello?
Hi, Melissa.
Oh, hi. Oh my gosh, I did not realize that was going to happen like that. Okay. Hello. Hi, everyone. I really appreciated all that you shared. Do you have any reflections or thoughts about, as a job seeker, looking at assessing the environment that you're potentially working in for like what burnout level staff are already at and how that could impact you? Things about in that nature when as you're like as a job seeker thinking about burnout.
That's a really good question. I've never been asked that before.
Ooh, good.
So I mean, I'm really curious, but I read, this was a recommendation on LinkedIn, so take it or leave it, but I thought it was actually really brilliant. Someone asked, why is this position open? Like why did the previous person leave, right? And from that you can kind of gauge, it's a question people often don't see coming too, and so you'll probably get a pretty honest answer. You can also ask, how do you prioritize employee well-being, right? And how do you feel about work-life balance? And you're probably going to get a lot of lip service of, oh, it's very important, right? And so asking for very concrete examples of like, what's the process of using PTO? How flexible is it to make my own schedule? And consider what are the things that you need to prevent burnout. Some people don't care that they have to get there right at 9 and they can't leave until 5. That doesn't bother them, but they need to be able to take off for their kids' conferences, right? And so whatever it is that you really need, don't be afraid to ask and say like, look, how do you feel about, Thursday at lunch, I need to go to my yoga class. Is that going to be an issue? And advocate for that. Yeah, that's a good question though, man.
Yeah.
And you could ask too. Yeah, you could ask too if they've ever done, like a culture audit, or if they ever, do employee, how would you word that? Like an employee experience, do you ever do 360 interviews or get employee feedback on how they're doing? Okay, or you can even ask, what do you do to prevent burnout in your staff?
Yeah, I guess that is true. Yeah. Cool. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, of course.
Laura, I wanted to call your attention to a couple of questions that have come in written.
Yeah.
Do you see where those are?
I do. The first one was, how would you recommend talking to your boss or manager about feeling burned out? So this one I wish was an easy answer. And this is one that I hear a lot, and it honestly depends on the manager and your relationship with them. I'm a firm believer that nothing's going to get better unless you let them know, right? And you might be surprised at how much they care. Lando is here. He's from my happy circle. He's saying hi. So you might be surprised at how much support you get in that situation. The only issue is that depending on the boss, right? Some people might unfortunately see it as a weakness. And so you kind of have to tread lightly. And so if you maybe, instead of using the word burnout, expressing that you've been experiencing high levels of work stress and that you need to take some time off or reevaluate your responsibilities and seeing if you can, delegate some of that. I hear my daughter too. She might be joining us too. So I hope that helps. Again, I'm sorry. It really honestly depends. And if you'd like to, email me with your specific situation, I'd happily help walk you through it. And then another person said, seeking suggestions for how to create boundaries at work in hopes of breaking the cycle of constant work and exhaustion. So now, again, deep breaths only work if you're doing it well. What I will say is that if you're able to lower your heart rate in those situations where you're feeling, when I hear boundaries at work, I'm thinking emotional boundaries. I'm thinking boundaries around my stress response and not letting everything impact it, right? My stress response is mine. I own it. I'm not going to let just anyone impact it. So what I have found helps is doing just even taking 1 or 2 deep breaths in those rough situations where you're feeling like, okay, that I'm having a conversation that's really igniting my stress right now. I'm going to just I'm going to start breathing from my belly, and that's going to lower your heart rate as much as possible, right? In those situations, and giving yourself, boundaries at work. Gosh, recognizing what's within your control, right? So if you're looking at Outlook at 8:30 at night, I'm totally guilty of this. I look and be like, oh, I'm just going to see what my day is like tomorrow. And then I end up looking and answering emails, right before bed. And I say, Laura, what are you doing? Stop. Right. And it takes practice to kind of break some of those bad habits, but not being afraid to say, this is my time. Like, this is, I'm not being paid for this. This is not worth it. This can wait for tomorrow. And practicing some of that. How do you know when it's time to move on from a job due to burnout? When are you too burned out? That is a question only you can answer. I knew I was too burned out when I read in a book once that said, it's called Trauma Stewardship. And the author, I read the whole book front to back, and it was toward the end. She said, and if you try all these things and it's still not helping, it's time to think, can I do this anymore? Is this worth it? And those words really struck me. I thought, oh my gosh, I don't think I can do this anymore. Right. And so I find, if you think about, okay, what if you stay for a month? What if you stay for 6 months? Right. And if you think, oh my gosh, 6 months, there's no way I could stay. How long can you stay and reevaluate, right? So is it just a month? Is it just a week? Can you stay one more week, right? And then decide, and let yourself reevaluate frequently. But, fortunately, and not in all fields, but fortunately right now, there's a lot of places that, it's not a bad time to be changing your career. But again, I would happily if you jot down my information, I'd happily help you out if you want to talk further about whether or not it's time to go. Megan's asking, are there any other books you would recommend reading? Trauma Stewardship is huge, especially if you work with people, by Laura Vandernoot Lipsky is her name. And I just read her new one that's a little bit more broad, outside of people work, called The Age of Overwhelm. And that one is incredible. And that one is for everybody, how we're all overwhelmed and why, how our culture kind of has impacted that, and what we can do to help ourselves through it. So those are two that come to mind right away. I mean, all the other ones I read are like really dry. They're like textbook kind of stuff. But I read a lot of, like I'm reading Nudge, and I'm really bad at remembering authors. That's another reason Nudge. There's another book that I just started reading on play and how important play is for our mental well-being, and what is play, and why don't we do it anymore, right? A lot of that stuff. So again, I'd happily make recommendations if folks want them. I'm kind of a nerd. Any other questions? I see Megan here.
I'm jumping in. Yes.
I'm going to say that must mean it's about time to move on to the next. So.
It is. If there are any questions, we probably have time for about one more. So if anyone wants to pop that into the chat or the Q&A, please do so. But Laura, thank you so much for those book recommendations. That was great. I don't know if there's any podcasts that you listen to that you would recommend that are maybe helpful when you're trying to relax.
You know what's funny is that like I try not to recommend her because I find her so annoying and how quotable she is. But Brene Brown's new is it Unlocking Us, I think is the name of her podcast. But I love how relatable she makes everything. And it just makes me think about things in a different way that I feel like she gets it. And she also has really concrete ways of helping think of things in a different way. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, just a general thank you again, Laura, for taking the time to provide some really helpful strategies into dealing with work stress, burnout, and hopefully how to get ahead of it. And to our audience, you are now invited back to the main stage for a quick break with the U of M's Bakken Center for Spirituality and Healing. And then after that, there will be some time for open networking that I hope you all take advantage of. So thank you again for joining us and have a great night.
Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight for the Maroon and Gold Connections virtual event and our breakout session here, Empowering Your Career Path. I'm Kabalia Thao, Associate VP of Engagement at the University of Minnesota Alumni Association, and your moderator for this session. I'll be monitoring the chat. I'll be taking down questions. But with that, I definitely love for us to get the show on the road. So it really is my honor and my privilege to introduce you to our speaker this evening, Becky Hall. Becky provides project management and leadership for coordinating career initiatives at the University of Minnesota, including graduate outcomes measurement, vendor selection, contract processing, program development, and event management. She partners with colleagues across the University of Minnesota system, including significant work with Student Affairs, Global Programs and Strategy Alliance, and institutional research. Becky is actively involved in many professional organizations and has served as president and on the executive board of the Minnesota Career Development Association. She has a MA in counseling and student personnel psychology from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, and a bachelor's of science in psychology and gerontology from the University of Minnesota Duluth. So Becky, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. And thanks for being here with me tonight. I'm happy to talk with you on the topic of empowering your career path. During our time here today, we'll first introduce the concept of career development. Then, knowing that people are in different phases in their own career and possibly in a career or job search, we'll spend some time talking about the job search and seeking out new opportunities. Next, I'll focus in on ways to empower yourself on the job. And then finally, we'll wrap up by giving you a bit of time to consider your own next steps and commitments you can make to yourself before opening up for discussion and Q&A. To get us all to the same starting point, let's just first define career empowerment. There are a lot of resources and information available to employers, whether they're in human resources or serving in a supervisory role, about ways to empower employees toward their career success. But what we're talking about here tonight is more inwardly focused on you. So from Indeed.com, here's a definition that specifies ways in which you can potentially empower your own career. Career empowerment is the act of controlling your own work environment as you're able and using your skills and talents in a way that benefits you and your organization, leading to more productivity and better outcomes. These successes can, in turn, promote greater opportunities for career growth and satisfaction in the workplace. We can't talk about the job search without first speaking to the nature of today's job market. These past couple of years have shifted so much in our lives, including how we pursue opportunities and are recruited and hired into work, as well as how we actually do the work once we're hired. One of the COVID pandemic's many impacts has been and continues to be its fallout in the workplace. The resulting pivots made in how and where we work led to what many of us have heard called the Great Resignation, originally coined as such by Anthony Klotz, an associate professor of management at Texas A&M University, during an interview with Bloomberg Businessweek. Or you may have heard it referred to as the Big Quit, or possibly the Great Reshuffling. No matter what you call it, there is, in my opinion, a misguided but common perception out there that this movement that people don't want to work. In reality, there are a myriad of factors which led to this Great Resignation across today's workforce, including subpar compensation or wage stagnation, people wanting to find a greater sense of purpose in their work, a need for greater work-life balance, including for many the flexibility to work remotely, and a need for alignment of one's work or workplace with their personal values systems. In addition, as we came into January of 2022, we were at a 4.0% unemployment rate, which for all intents and purposes is considered full employment. Between the Great Resignation and our collective high employment, now is an opportune time for you to be pursuing ways to grow as a professional, either within your current role or to consider ways to position yourself for that next career move. As an early career professional, it can be difficult to strike a balance between what you're learning and or taking on as a new professional with your desire to grow and position yourself for that next step on your career path. But here are a few things to consider. Learning opportunities are out there. Ask for them. Is there a technology resource that you keep hearing about in staff meetings and one-to-one interactions with colleagues that you don't know much about, but it continues to come up as a resource people are using to help? Maybe with streamlining communications campaigns or creating solid data visualizations. Are there training options available to help get you more up to speed with that technology? Also, pay attention to what others are saying that they need. Are you able to help out? For example, if a colleague has been tasked with carrying out an annual company event, are they looking for ways to streamline pieces of the planning process? Do you have the bandwidth to help provide support on that initiative? Ask if there is a piece of this work that you can help to pick up for them. Take on stretch projects. First of all, try to look at your work through a project-based lens. This perspective can make work feel much more manageable, as projects are neatly defined through time-based constraints and output expectations. At work, show initiative by being attentive to the needs of your organization and offer to take an active role in project-based work as you're able to. Are there pieces to a project that you can support? Is there a project-based initiative that you can help to lead? Be willing to stretch. The gig economy isn't just about flexibility and the potential for supplemental income, although those things are great, don't get me wrong. But going back to that Great Resignation and sense of purpose, many people, likely even some of you here today, have either taken a pause or are considering a more substantial career shift. Finding the right kind of project-based work inside of your organization may not be what you need to stretch yourself professionally or to get the needed experience outside of your industry. Consider looking into project-based work in the gig economy. With the need for talent so great right now, there are plenty of opportunities for you to lend your talent to support project-based needs on a shorter-term basis. Consider some of these resources named here as places to explore different gig types of opportunities. One important note to mention here regarding stretching for new opportunities before we move on has to do with the gender gap in terms of pursuit of opportunities. According to an analysis of job application rates across gender differences done by Tara Sophia Moore of the Harvard Business Review, women for various reasons may feel they need to meet 100% of the criteria for a job, whereas men will more often apply even if they only meet about 60% of those requirements. Based on applicant tracking data from LinkedIn over the course of all of 2018 in its Gender Insights report, women are 16% less likely than men to apply to a job after viewing it. And women apply to 20% fewer jobs overall than men. So for the women here today, keep this in mind as you move forward in your pursuit of growth opportunities. Related to job search, I want to be sure to mention Handshake. Handshake is available to all University of Minnesota students from all 5 system campuses in a degree program or to University of Minnesota alumni. Handshake is the university's software platform used for jobs and internships. Here, you can see that we have a lot of opportunities that are posted for our students and alumni. In more than half of the jobs that have been posted over the last 6 months, employers have indicated they are either open to or are seeking alumni talent. In addition to the many opportunities on Handshake, it is also a great tool for you if you're looking to either learn about companies in various industry sectors or are looking for specific contacts at a given organization. With over 30,000 companies or organizations and nearly 70,000 plus recruiter contacts, Handshake can be a rich resource for you to start expanding your network and outreach. In your job search, career fairs are another resource to consider taking advantage of, and I want to call out just a couple of examples for you here. The University of Minnesota Job and Internship Fair. This particular event, coming up next Friday, is open to current students and alumni up to 3 years post-graduation. When attending career fairs, look at employers by industry area, not just by name. You may surprise yourself by engaging with opportunities you didn't even know existed with organizations you'd never heard of or thought about working for previously. To the more experienced alumni here with us today, CareerForce Minnesota provides a search tool that you can use to find upcoming career-related events and fairs throughout Minnesota. In addition, if you are not involved with a professional association, this can be a great way to network, both formally and informally. For example, in my own professional area, the Minnesota Career Development Association hosts regular events that provide an opportunity for professional development and for networking with colleagues. The U.S. Department of Labor's Career One Stop hosts a tool referenced here that is quite useful in terms of looking up professional associations by industry or occupation name. As I'd mentioned when talking about the Great Resignation and our overall employment rate, how we work and how we search for jobs has changed in the past 2 years. It remains to be seen what recruiting and the job search will look like long term. But it's safe to say that, at least for the near future, there is definitely a place for virtual in the process. To give some perspective from research done by our partners at Handshake, in its 2021 Who Wins with Virtual Recruiting Trends report, on a 5-point scale, students rated the virtual fair video experience out of 4.4 and employers out of 4.2, both very favorable. Potentially opening up greater opportunities for access and equity, more women students than men and more students of color than white students prefer virtual career events and interviews over in person. And more than 3 in 4 employers predict that even after the pandemic has subsided, they will continue to engage college students remotely. As you move through the job search process, one important consideration is, of course, your overall compensation, with the largest component of this being your pay or salary. In the job search, there is lots of research for you to do. To stand out amongst other applicants or interviewees, you will need to learn about your job prospects, organizational culture, high demand skills sets, and opportunities for professional growth and advancement. You will also serve yourself well to do your best due diligence in salary research. After all, You can't get more money if you don't ask for it. And because raises are often calculated from your base pay, a higher salary ultimately means higher raises down the road. There are lots of tools available for you to use, and one I personally find to be relatively useful and reliable is Glassdoor. This resource provides you with self-reported salary metrics from people working in your field or at a given company. You can also use Glassdoor to look into market comparisons across geographic areas. One recent trend worth noting has been pay transparency requirements for employers. These include wage range disclosure obligations that require employers to provide or publicize wage ranges for vacant positions or promotions. Specifically, several states have enacted pay transparency laws, with Colorado having the strictest requirements, having employers disclose the pay or pay range and other forms of compensation of a position in the posting itself. If you are negotiating a job offer or are advocating for a salary raise for yourself, know the value add you bring to the organization. As a job seeker, for example, are there ways you can quantify your potential contributions to the organization based on your past successes? If you are pursuing a salary raise, how can you quantify your output in terms of increased revenue, new clientele, or time saved? Here's another area where I want to make sure to make a specific call out for the women in attendance tonight. Negotiation takes a level of assertiveness of all of us, but this can oftentimes be viewed as an unlikable trait in a woman. And for those from here in Minnesota, there may be a heightened concern over the need to be Minnesota nice. Please consider ways in which you can practice being more assertive to learn how to advocate on your own behalf. At the end of the day, the exchange of your talent and time in service to the organization is a business transaction. Sometimes there truly isn't room to budge on your rate of pay in terms of an hourly wage or salary. But compensation is about more than just money. Consider what else you may be able to negotiate. What is available for vacation time or paid time off? Is there flexibility in terms of 401k matching or vesting timeframes? One area that has become so much more important to people, especially over these past couple of years, is the ability to work remotely. If working remotely or having a flexible working situation or schedule is important to you, is this a negotiable as part of your job offer or with your current employer? As an early career professional, it's advisable to get into the practice of seeking out feedback at work. We all stand to learn from feedback, even or possibly especially when it's not the feedback we want to hear. Most workplaces have some sort of formalized annual review process in place, most of the time with your direct supervisor. Annual reviews can be a good starting point for a sort of feedback loop. But if you're only doing a once-a-year check-in against a set of goals or metrics, it's not likely very useful to you in terms of helping you know how your work is being perceived and how you are being perceived as a professional. Your supervisor is the most obvious point person to consider when seeking out feedback, and they should hopefully know your work output and have perspective on how you're progressing at your organization. If they share points of feedback that you disagree with, it's better to know this ahead of when it comes time to document your performance metrics in any formalized review. That way, you can seek out ways to grow and develop your skills and take corrective actions throughout the year so that there aren't any end-of-year surprises. There are also other key people in your work life who may also be great sources of feedback. The first being your peer colleagues. You spend most of your time at work with your peers, and they have a better line of sight to your effectiveness in terms of project outcomes and your working style. Because there is no power differential between you and your peers, you can ask for and offer to provide feedback on a more frequent and less formal basis. And lastly, if you are in a position where you supervise others, consider seeking out feedback. Again, we all can learn and grow from feedback, and the boss is no exception. To continue to grow as a leader, you need to create a culture of trust for your team to be open with you. If necessary, set up anonymous 360-degree feedback loops, or seek out 1 or 2 trusted people who will give you the honest feedback you need. On the job, it's important to let your manager know about your career goals. While we're talking here today about what you can do to empower movement on your own career path, you want to keep your manager informed about your career goals too. In their role, your manager will be in conversations and meetings with others that you simply are not a part of. If they know what your goals are, they may be able to help advocate for you and your role with other teams or higher level management about any upcoming project before you're even aware that the project is being considered, or at the beginning stages of a project when it's being planned out. Some of you may wonder if it really is advisable to talk with your manager about your career goals. To help illustrate the importance of this, I'd like to share an example from a meeting I had back in December with a colleague who is a manager of a large team at a Fortune 500 company. This particular individual really tries to focus on how he can be a supportive manager. He meets regularly with team members to talk about their goals, not just at the required 6-month and annual review intervals. And he's known for being someone who has an open door policy and prides himself on being approachable. He shared with me how disappointed he was to have lost a new rising star on his team who had accepted a position outside of the company. In her exit interview, she shared with him that while she loved the company and working on the team, she wanted to grow her skills with some newer technology tools. She was afraid that if she spoke up so early in her career, she might be perceived as being difficult or arrogant, and thought she needed to move in order to get the growth opportunity that she was seeking. His disappointment and frustration was more a result of her not having come to him, as he knew from higher level meetings he'd just recently been in that his team would soon be managing a project to implement one of those new technology tools she brought up in that exit interview. Had she come to him to express her interest, she may have had the opportunity to grow her desired skill set at a company and with a team she already very much liked. Whether in the job search or on the job, no matter what stage you're at in your career, your network is one of your most important professional assets. For many people, the whole idea of networking can conjure up a mental image of glad handing with a bunch of strangers in a crowded room. This is not what networking should be about. In fact, when done right, successful networking can help you to meet industry acquaintances, establish business partnerships, and learn about industry trends and job prospects. To help make networking less intimidating, approach each interaction as a mutually beneficial conversation. Think ahead of time about what you would like to get from the conversation. And as much as you're able to ahead of time, consider what you bring to the conversation. What can you give back? Consider your purpose for growing your network. Are you looking to learn about ways to grow your skill set? Are you looking for job prospects? Are you looking to relocate to another city or state? Do you want to learn more about working at a given company? Now, who are the people in your network who can help you to achieve your purpose? Who do you work with? Who did you formerly work with? What about professors or teachers? Coaches? How about your friends? What about your family? What about the family of friends? People in your neighborhood? Many of the people I just referenced are not necessarily people you may consider as being in your network, but they are. We just don't always find ourselves having professionally oriented conversations with those closest to us. And then finally, I just want to be sure to call out the Maroon and Gold Network here at the University of Minnesota. After all, we're here tonight at the University of Minnesota Alumni Association's Maroon and Gold networking event. If you haven't explored it, this is a great tool for you to use to start establishing an online network with our own University of Minnesota alumni. The name of our session, again, is Empowering Your Career Path. In relation to this topic, I've been sharing with you here tonight around the concept of career empowerment, some of the factors in the makeup of today's job market, job search tools, resources, and tactics, and ways to stretch and grow on the job as an early career professional. Based on what you have heard here and where you are in your own career journey, I want to pose a question for each of you to consider. What can you commit to today? Think about one concrete step that you can identify today to help you move forward in empowering your own career. Maybe it's jotting down the names of 2 or 3 of the people in your network who you hadn't previously thought about as being in your network, and planning a timeline for when you will make time to reach out to each one of those people. Maybe you need to designate dedicated time to dive into a resource like Handshake to get a better sense of what job titles and roles align with your own next step career goals. According to research done by Gail Matthews out of Dominican University in California, 42% of us, we're 42% more likely to achieve our goals when we write them down. So I'm going to have us take a few minutes here tonight for you to pause, think about, and write down your next step career goal. What can you commit to today? So we're going to pause here, and let's take just a little under 5 minutes for you to consider and then write down an actionable next step career goal that you feel like you can commit to today. Go. You can probably see in the chat, we were welcoming people to come in if folks are willing to. No pressure, honestly, no pressure. But I am wondering if anyone would be open to sharing here what they wrote down.
Hello.
Hi.
So I was considering what you were saying about, the greater networks we don't think about and stuff. And well, there was one time my dad reached out to someone at his work that's in the field that I'm sort of looking at, like sustainability director, and I ended up talking with this lady and I got her contact info. And I haven't reached out to her in a while. So I guess I could reach out to her sometime, and ask if she knows about open positions that are akin to hers, or my partner's best friend is also in the same sort of field, and I think she's graduating before me as well, so she might be a good person to reach out to.
Wyatt, thanks a lot for sharing. I appreciate you bringing that out. And yep, you're absolutely right. I think you've kind of identified a couple of next step goals that you can take. I don't know if you wrote them down, but we heard you here. So yeah, just hearing you articulate that, that's great. Yep, I think that's a really important thing to consider is when I was talking about networks, it's also about maintaining those networks and reaching out to those people maybe you've made connections with in the past. So great opportunity. Thank you very much. I'm going to just move us forward here just briefly. Take a look here. We've got some resources that you'll be able to get access to after the fact, but these are kind of a lot of the resources that were referenced here tonight during my talk. And then honestly, we're just at that point where we're going to open up for Q&A or discussion. I want to thank you very much all for being here. I appreciate this opportunity, and I wish each of you the best in your career journey. Let's see who else we are hearing from here.
All right, and feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A section or in the chat, or if you'd like to turn on your camera, I'm here as well too, so I'm monitoring all three sections, and would love to hear any questions that you have. Becky, I just to start out, I definitely have a question for you. You showed a great slide that said, I think it was like men were 20, or after women read job descriptions, they oftentimes will opt not to apply for the positions. And I wonder, I've been in similar situations where I've read through and I'm like, I don't think I, meet all the qualifications. And then I see another person come into that role, and a lot of the things that I've done actually are equal or more than that individual. And I was just wondering, how do we continue to encourage ourselves to apply for something or step outside the box to be able to get these positions that we want?
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And I think part of it is just making this information around those statistics more known to people. That definitely is one piece. One thing that I think I've seen some potential movement on here too, especially during this time when it's harder for people to source talent, is a little bit of opening up on qualifications and people being really mindful as they're hiring to be thinking about what really truly are my required qualifications and what might be preferred. And so as people are moving a little bit more towards things that normally may have stood as a required qualification for opportunities, I think we all, no matter kind of where we're coming from, need to be looking at opportunities a bit more with an open mind as well. And that people probably do have some flexibility. Again, it's a bit of a buyer's market here right now. I think it's worth it for folks to be willing to dip your toes in a little bit. Maddie, thank you very much for sharing. So congratulations on, I'm going to say, yes, you are absolutely going to succeed at this, and happy to know that you're graduating from graduate school here coming up this spring. And yep, absolutely. Think about those people that you're meeting in those trainings, and kind of, as you're leaving, and we have a networking session coming up here, not too long down the road, for those of you here on our session here tonight. Be capturing people's information. How can you take that conversation further? Other questions? Kathleen, I'm going to leave this to you.
Yes, we can definitely post the slides, Maddie. And there's after this, well, I have your name here, so I can definitely share it out this way. But I believe that we will be sharing, have a opportunity for everyone to access the slides after this event as well too. So no matter what happens, I will make sure that you have a copy, Maddie.
Wonderful.
Hey, Shua, that's a great question. Shua's asking, I'm curious if other sessions are also recorded so we can watch at another time. And yes, all the sessions are recorded, and we should be sending those out once this event is over as well, too. Great question, Shua. Thank you.
I'm not sure what the timeline is on that. And sometimes there might need to be a bit of a pause. Sometimes with recording of these, there needs to be some captioning that's done before things can go out for folks. So I'm not sure kind of where that might be, but yeah, look for those.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great point. I mean, even Becky and I had been sitting in the session maybe about 20 or 30 minutes before folks started jumping on. So I'm sure the first half of this will just be us sitting here together.
It would be a little bit not too terribly exciting for you all. Other thoughts that are coming up for folks. What jumped out at you? We heard from Maddie, we heard from Wyatt. Anyone else open to sharing kind of what that next step piece may be? Oh, yep. And from one of the organizers, we did just have it verified. Yes, these will be posted out to YouTube after the fact. Well, again, thank you very much, everybody, for being here. It's been a pleasure and an honor to talk to you. I wish you all the best on your career journey.
Hello, and welcome to this Mindfulness Break. My name is Mary Ann Johnson, and I'm a well-being and mindfulness instructor at the Earl Bakken Center for Spirituality and Healing here at the University of Minnesota. And I couldn't be happier to be here with all of you this evening. So I'm just going to take a few minutes with you to explore mindfulness as a practice that can help refresh, rejuvenate, reduce stress, and really increase our awareness. Our ability to be fully engaged and present in our life is one way I like to think about it. Mindfulness is often described as being here now, this quality of being able to bring ourselves fully engaged with the present moment. And it's an innate capacity that we all have that can be trained and with practice. And those practices can be, many of you have probably heard of mindfulness meditation. I would call that more of a formal practice, but we can also build that muscle of mindfulness, if you will, also through informal activities through the day. When we're driving our car, that's a good place to be mindful, or washing dishes or speaking to somebody and really listening. Another mode of being able to practice mindfulness is in movement. And my guess is that many of you have already had kind of a long day today, and it might be kind of nice to move just a little bit here. So I'm going to do two little practices with you. One is mindful movement, and the other will be a mindfulness exercise, more of a reflective meditation experience, a really brief one. So if you'd be willing to join me on this, that would be terrific. We'll just do some mindfulness movements right now, some mindful movement. And I'm just going to suggest that you honor your body's needs and adapt anything I might do. I'm going to keep this pretty simple. I'm going to do it seated just because of my camera with you now, but you are more than welcome to also take the same premises that I'm talking about and bringing it to a upright standing position. So Let's do a seated mountain posture to begin with. Isn't that nice? Maybe we can just envision ourselves embodying a magnificent, beautiful mountain. With our feet, both feet, mine are about hip width distance apart. I'm also sitting on the edge of my chair, and I might suggest you do the same. Both feet firmly planted on the ground, and the ankles in alignment with the knees. And maybe you want to press the feet into the ground just a bit, as if you're feeling roots coming out of the bottoms of the feet, really connecting you with the earth itself, as if the base of a mountain. And then maybe there's from the base of the spine all the way up the back, as if there's a sense of uplift, of rising upward. Feet grounded into the earth, spine rising up. Maybe rolling back the shoulders just a little bit here. And bringing that attention that's always so externally oriented, or more often than not throughout our days, bringing that lens inward now as best you can, maybe with a sense of warmth and compassion, maybe just a softness, whatever works for you. So with this sense of uplift now, maybe it would be nice to just do some really simple neck rolls, especially if you've been sitting like this at your computer for a good portion of the day. So I'm just going to begin by suggesting, if it's possible for you to do so, bringing your chin down towards the collarbone or the chest. And maybe just noticing what that feels like to release the shoulder and neck muscles here. Maybe inviting a softening around the corners of the eyes and the mouth, the forehead as well. And then when you're ready, just doing a slight rotation from side to side as I'm doing now. Not all the way back, just a half moon, I like to call this. Maybe just one more on either side. And now if it would feel good for you, maybe just a nice stretch. Maybe giving yourself a little hug and feeling the stretch in between the two shoulder blades there. And maybe switching hands. And then if you'd like, maybe just lifting up the arms, lacing the fingers together, and a nice final stretch up, tucking in that chin just a little bit. Spine is straight, feet planted in the earth in that mountain posture. And let's all take a really deep, satisfying in-breath together. And then when you're ready, a slow release of the arms and the breath. All right. Just a few mindful movements. And maybe we can pause here now before I begin a more formal approach, a mindful exercise, a meditation or reflection here. For you just to transition into sitting in a more still position now. And before we begin, just maybe taking a mindful moment to scan your body, noticing the quality of the body, the mind, and maybe the heart now too, having just done those simple movements. Is there more of a sense of vitality, aliveness? Maybe sensations, maybe a little bit of change in the breath. Mindfulness is all about noticing, so much so, without judgment, as best we can. Discernment, dose of kindness. All right. Now for the remainder of our time together, if you'd like, I'll invite you to either close your eyes, and if that doesn't feel right for you, maybe just a soft gaze forward, just quieting that busy visual field, which can also busy the mind a bit. And let's just begin once again by intentionally turning that gaze inward. Because our breath, our body are always in the present moment, such a terrific instrument for us to come home to. When we're carried away into ruminating about the past or leaning into the future, we can sometimes, and maybe we'll all do that together right now, just take in a nice, satisfying in-breath, deep and full, maybe pursing the lips with the out-breath, And really extending that out breath out long, just letting go. The felt sense of the breath and the body coming home to the present moment. Letting go, maybe noticing tension holding in the body and inviting a softening as best you can. And then letting go of those deeper, fuller breaths. And we're just going to come in contact now with the natural rhythmic quality of this breath of ours, body that knows just how to breathe, no need to change it, manipulate it. Just kind of riding the rhythmic quality of the in-breath and the out-breath. Just observing, being with. And when you notice that your attention may wander off to a thought or a memory or a to-do list item, you can smile at that and know that happens to all of us. And with kindness, as best you can, just escort your attention back to the breath. Notice if it's an in-breath or an out-breath, and begin this stepping back and just observing that subtle rhythmic quality of the breath again. Just this breath, just this moment. Allowing the body to just soften in, be held by the chair, supported. As you come home to this constant companion of the breath. And now, when you're ready, if you'd like, as we bring this brief exercise to a conclusion, given the theme of this event, maybe just thinking for a moment about the power of connection in your own life, the gifts you've received from connecting with others, and the gifts you've given of connection with others. Maybe just holding them in your mind's eye, some of the people, the places, the gifts given and received. And maybe taking just a moment now to plant an intention, a mindful intention for the remainder of your time together at this event, one of connection, an intention around that, if you'd like. And then when you're ready, taking in a final, deeper, fuller in-breath and out-breath. And if your eyes have been closed, I invite you to open them now. Maybe just look around the room, reorient yourself, do a little stretch. Thank you very much for joining me, and may you thoroughly enjoy the remainder of this event together. Remember your intention. Bye-bye.